Hey folks, Randy Newberg here with another episode of Leupold's Hunt Talk Radio. Today I got a really cool guest. He and I have been talking about this podcast for probably over a year now, and I'm thankful that he's been able to find the time to come and do it, because I think when you hear it, the story, the background, and everything else, you're going to say, wow, that was worth listening to. But before we get there, I want to talk to you about the companies that make this possible. We call it Leupold's Hunt Talk Radio for a reason. Leupold Optics is the title sponsor of pretty much everything we do. So that's why they are, I guess, the company that we are so thankful for. They make this podcast possible, our TV show, our platforms of YouTube, Amazon, everything else. And they just make amazing optics for those of us who hunt and shoot. And they're huge supporters of the public lands, huge supporters of hunting in general. And the style of content we produce is something they're how do I even say it? They're just really, really passionate about it, like we are. Thanks to Leupold for being the sponsor of this podcast. We also have GoHunt.com. You hear us talk about application season, which it is right now. We use their insider service, which has great draw odds, has great research, has unbelievable strategy articles about every species in every western state. Between the strategy articles and the draw odds, I just don't know where you're going to get that kind of information anywhere else that's as concise, as accurate, and as thorough. So if you go to GoHunt.com and you sign up for the Insider, use promo code RANDY, R-A-N-D-Y, and you're going to get $50 of free mad money, like cash to spend in their gear shop. And their gear shop is serious good stuff. It is not your big box store quality of gear. It's serious gear. Also is Orion Coolers. Orion Coolers is, well, you see us living out of them. You see us using them, abusing them, and using them for everything you can think of. And they do an amazing job for all the demands we place on them. And if you go to orioncoolers.com and you buy one of their coolers and use promo code RANDY, man, we're making this easy, right? Use promo code RANDY out at orioncoolers.com, and you're going to get yourself one of these really cool tumblers that is etched with our logos and stuff. And you will also have the best cooler that money can buy. And last but never least is Onyx Maps. OnyxMaps.com is where you go to get all of their details, all their products, all their services. You hear us talking about all these places we hunt, how we do things, how we draw tags in areas that have, I'm going to say, questionable or difficult public access. The reason we can draw those tags and we can hunt effectively in those units is that we have the Onyx system with us. And that Onyx map system is critical. I don't know how I would hunt a lot of the places I do without the Onyx system. So go out to onyxmaps.com. When you buy any of the app products for a smartphone and use promo code RANDY, you're going to get 20% off your purchase. How's that, huh? We just made it worth your time to listen to all this. But if that wasn't worth your time, when you hear Todd Orr's story about, well, he's a knife maker. He's a backcountry dude. He's an amazing elk hunter and does a lot of it with a handgun. And those of you, and if you're in the outdoor and hunting world, even if you aren't, in the fall of 2016, you saw a guy post a Facebook video that he took of himself after a grizzly bear attack. And that was Todd. So Todd's been nice enough to join me here. And as quick as I get the door closed and everything, you're going to hear a little click. And Todd's going to be on the podcast. We're going to talk hunting. We're going to talk backcountry. We're going to talk knife making. And I don't think you could have Todd Orr on a podcast without talking about grizzly bears, grizzly bear defense, grizzly bear attacks, what his thoughts and perspectives are on grizzly bears. So with that, folks, you're in for a treat here. Hold on. Well, folks, I told you you're going to want to be here for this one. Todd, thanks for taking the time out of your very busy day. As many things as you got going on, I can't believe you found the time to come and do a podcast with me.
Well, thanks, Randy. Happy to be here and looking forward to it.
Good. Well, like I said, folks, Todd Orr, I'm going to tell a few things about Todd, but everyone's going to be envious of Todd's lifestyle. So I'm going to let him tell as much as he wants or as little as he wants. And my job is to try pull out the little bits and pieces, because the two camera guys were here when Todd came in, and I don't know if he noticed this, but the camera guys were like, man, I wish I had his job. I don't know if that's a function of...
it's not that great.
That they don't want to work for me or they want to be you. But I don't even know where to start with you, Todd. You got so many things going on. Maybe we should start with your knife making.
Knife making.
That work for you?
Skyblade knives.
Yeah, custom knives.
Been building custom knives for just hit 30 years now. Started in 87, fall of 87.
How did you get into that?
There was a knife maker over in Ennis where my parents live with my family, and he was a friend of the family, and he was over at the folks' house having dinner one night, and I happened to go over there to say hi to the parents, and he's like, hey, you ought to come out to my shop. I'd love to show you how to make a knife. And so I was working over there for a fly shop during the week, and on the evenings and weekends, I'd run out to his shop, and he kind of showed me how to build a knife for myself. And then he was like, wow, you do really good work. I could use your help. And he was selling his knives at the Hole in the Wall Art Gallery over in Ennis.
Yeah.
And so instead of coming back to Bozeman for college that fall, I ended up just working for him and just building knives at, like $5 an hour or something like that. And he's selling them for like $300 in the gallery. And I did that for a couple months, and then came back to Bozeman after Christmas for college. And he's like, hey, if you want to start doing this your own, he's like, I got a couple books you can order materials from. I'm like, that'd be great. I'd love to keep doing this. So got back to Bozeman and had a buddy with a garage, and I didn't even have a garage that I could set up a shop in, but set up a shop in a buddy's garage and started, building a knife for a friend I'd meet in school and for his dad for Father's Day or something. And I'd build one here and one there kind of on the weekend. And that was kind of my start. And after doing that for about a year and just maybe made a dozen knives or something and sold to friends for $80 or $100. And then Bob Shoup was the knife maker over in Ennis that had taught me. And he was like in his 80s, and his hands weren't working very well and arthritis. And he decided he was going to quit making knives. And the Hole in the Wall Art Gallery called me because they knew that I'd been helping Bob the year before. And they're like, hey, Bob can't do this anymore. We'd love to carry your knives in our gallery. And so that was my first outlet. Cool. I'm like, okay, great. So then I got to step up the game here a little bit and get some different equipment and upgrade my shop a little bit. And then the accountant at the Hole in the Wall Gallery was also the accountant at Montana Trails Gallery in Bozeman. Okay. And so she mentioned to Steve that I built these knives. Then Steve calls me and he's like, hey, we'd love to have your knives in my gallery. And it just kind of kept expanding until I was selling knives in probably a dozen places around the country, sporting goods stores, art galleries, and that kind of got my whole start into it. Okay. So I had to research the better steel, the best materials, and trying to use the best stainless steel available and lifetime warranty. And it just kept going and going. And now it's been 30 years I've been working on this.
How many knives do you suppose that you've made in 30 years of being a knife builder?
Oh, I haven't kept track, but I probably build about 150 a year, maybe something like that. Over 30 years, and I had a couple years where it might have been 200 and a couple a little bit less, but a few thousand knives, I'm guessing. So,
oh, wow. That's
they're all over the world. I think I've probably up 13 or 14 different countries I've sold knives to.
Really?
So, yep.
And are they just about all hunting knives?
I do mostly hunting knives. I have 30 or 40 different models, different blade lengths and designs, mostly hunting knives. Some kitchen steak knives, carving sets, fillet knives as well. Okay. But probably 90% are hunting knives of different models, anywhere from a 2-inch blade up to a short sword, if you want it, I guess.
Short sword.
I do a lot of custom orders, and people have an idea in their head, and they'll design it out.
So if somebody's listening to this and they want a Todd Orr's Skyblade knife, so which The first time I met you, and I'm sure you probably don't remember it because it's very unremarkable. You had a booth at the Bozeman gun.
Oh, at one of the gun shows. Yeah, that's been 15 years ago.
Yeah,
or 20.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, look at that knife. And my wife saw me coveting and fondling and looking at this knife, and I'm pretty sure that she probably said no. Maybe for your birthday, but not a casual purchase, Randy.
Yeah, I used to do the gun shows just to get some more exposure, but now it's, between my website and repeat customers, word of mouth, social media, it's so busy. I haven't done a gun show since about then, 15 years ago. Yeah. And I just can't stand sitting inside any more than I have to. I sit in those gun shows and you're looking, it's always a sunny weekend outside. And I'm just like dying. It's like, I want to get out and go for a hike. Yeah. And so tough.
That website, what's the address?
Skybladeknives.com. Very simple.
That's pretty easy.
And it's about a 20-year-old website. It's very outdated. You can't order off of it. You just look at photos and read all about me. But one of these days I'll get to doing a new website. But that'll give you all the info, and then people can email me or give me a call or a text.
Well, that's a good way to kind of qualify your customer. If they can't just buy it right there, mm-hmm. and they will go through the work of emailing or calling you, they're pretty serious about wanting one of those knives, right?
And we can personalize that knife a lot more too, because then they're like, they have a knife design in their head, and they're like, I think I want this one, and then I kind of explain what that knife is, and they're like, oh, that's maybe too big for the use I need, for what I want to use it for. And so then I'm like, okay, no problem. Here's a better design, a different size that might work better for you. Yeah. And so I can kind of figure what that person wants and get exactly the knife they need.
Cool. Well, as someone who's done a lot of trapping in their life, like I have, the number of knives I've lost or ruined or destroyed, or I should have been a knife maker, I guess.
Well, now you know one, so we can cover it here. No problem.
Oh, there we go. So can we tell the world where you grew up without all your former friends and classmates being mad at you?
I don't know. It's kind of the last best place around here.
I know.
So, I grew up over in a little town of Ennis, right on the Madison River in the Madison Valley, southwest Montana. It's about 90 miles from Yellowstone Park, and it's a little piece of heaven. It's a beautiful place, and a lot of hunting and fishing, outdoor activities, 10,000-foot peaks. Good place to grow up. Small town.
Can you grow up in Ennis, Montana without being a fly fisherman and an elk hunter?
You really can't. No, it's got blue ribbon trout stream running right through the middle there, the Madison River, and it's been famed river forever. And the fly fishing, the rainbow trout, excellent, and a lot of good elk hunting, deer hunting, you name it.
Yeah, I guess if you were in 8th grade or 10th grade and you weren't an elk hunter and a fly fisherman, you'd probably get teased. You'd be like...
You get beat up, I think. Yeah you probably...
Could be a hard life.
Yeah, those kids had to move.
Send those kids to Bozeman. Go to Bozeman.
You're a city kid. Get out of here.
Well, that makes sense about how you've built this whole life around the outdoors, and
it really is. Everything I do, from work to play, recreation, it's all outdoors. I try to minimize any time, in the office or in the house or in front of the TV. That's all minimal, and I'm usually outside, exercise and enjoying the fresh air.
Well, maybe we should have hauled this podcast kit up to the top of some peak or something.
Very good.
We should have did the pod, because I can run it off AA batteries.
It looks a little wind out there might be a problem, though. You never know.
Yeah, I think the audience would get tired of the wind whistling through the microphones. But anyone who wants one of those custom hunting knives that you make, is there like a big back order, or can they get it? Do you have some existing inventory?
I keep some inventory on hand.
Okay.
I try to anyway. It's been crazy busy, but I try to keep some inventory on hand. I had a lady call this morning that said, I need a knife today for my husband. It's their 40th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
And so I sent her a couple photos, and she picked one out, and I engraved it and delivered it right before I got here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I do have some on inventory. If it's a custom order, or if I don't have what you're looking for, Usually 2 to 3 month wait to be safe to get a custom order built for you. But I have a lot of different designs, sizes. We can custom order something. If you got an idea in your head, draw it out. I can kind of work with it and get something for you.
Well, Father's Day is the middle of June. People better give
coming up.
They better give it the program if they want one of Todd's knives.
Yeah, even get your Christmas orders in now, because it gets come about hunting season and Christmas are my busiest times of the year, and you definitely are going to be on an order list at that point.
Yeah. So I'm a CPA, and I plan that CPA gig pretty well for being a hunter because tax season is January through April 15th. A knife maker, is he going to be occupied in hunting season, or is it like put the closed sign on the...
No, hunting season through Christmas is my busiest time of the year. Oh. So in the winter, when it's a little slower, I try to get as much inventory together as I can. So a lot of those people, I'm like, here's what I have. Pick one of these, please. Yeah, don't make me go to the shop anymore. So, and then I also, my other job, my career job is, spring through fall, trying to do as much field work as possible. So that minimizes my time in the shop. And, we're trying to take advantage of the sunlight that we get here. And so it's 50, 60-hour weeks. So it's very busy.
Because you're a trail engineer. You're out designing and plotting.
I do all the trails engineering for the Forest Service for the Gallatin-Custer National Forest here.
Yeah.
So I'm in the woods just about every day. I'm doing the design, where the trail's going to go, the location, the staking, flagging, survey, GPS. And once we get a contract out there to build that trail, I'm working with that contractor, making sure it's done to our specifications, making sure he's getting paid properly. Yeah. From beginning to end, I'm out there overseeing that whole project.
Wow.
So in the woods every day.
Huh. Well, I'm sorry to have you in an office today, Todd.
That's all right. It's okay.
So, see, folks, I told you that when you hear the whole story of what Todd does and the life he leads, you're all going to say, now, how do I sign up for a gig like that? So you went to school here at MSU at Montana State?
Yeah, I went to Bozeman at Montana State University, got a degree in fish and wildlife management.
Okay.
And
that's like half the students at MSU, I think, start in fish and wildlife management, don't they?
Well, originally, I had pretty good grades in high school, and my advisor in high school was like, oh, you need to get into some kind of tech thing, something you make a bunch of money. And I had signed up for DeVry Institute of Technology in Phoenix. I was going to go into like computer, electrical engineering kind of stuff or something.
Right.
And it was like 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave after I graduated. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a big city. I don't want to be the rest of my life working on computers and electronics. And so I just canceled that and signed up late at MSU, late registration, and went into general studies. And then by the first quarter into it, I'm like, fish and wildlife, that's been my life. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, when you said DeVry, if I got this panicked look on my face, the podcast audience has heard many times me mention this story of getting thrown in jail in Mexico.
I've not heard this.
Oh, and we had to run away from the authorities. It cost us a brand new Toyota 4-wheel drive pickup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we had to leave it there as ransom for them to let us out that night. The sentencing, not the hearing, the sentencing was the next morning. And he said, but if you leave the truck here, I'll let you go. Well, Rich Jackson, who owned the truck, it had hardly any miles on it. He got it as a graduation gift. Well, he was in the electrical engineering program at DeVry in Phoenix, as was my buddy Jerry Pritchard. So if you would have been at DeVry in 84 and 85.
Would have been fall of 84. It'd have been starting.
No.
So
I
could have been part of that.
It happened. This calamity happened in September of 1984. Todd, you missed your chance. I mean, we could have added so much more color to your life. Rich was from Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Jerry and I grew up in northern Minnesota, but I'm sorry. I didn't mean a diversion there.
Sounds like a good story there, too.
Yeah, well, everyone's asking, when are you going to tell the full details of that Mexico jail story?
Never.
And I know we're going to tell it, but I got to have Jerry with me on the podcast, and my uncle Jimmer, who's a year older than me. He was my roommate at Arizona State, and he was with us. So I figure if we have 3 witnesses there who all corroborate the same version of events, it will be believable.
Okay.
But I think to this point, though, since people have only heard my version, they think it's all BS. But anyhow, that's a tangent of your college story, and that allowed you then to...
Yeah, so I got the degree in fish and wildlife management, and before I had actually graduated, I started working for the Forest Service in the summers.
Okay.
And that was a summer job. I was working in timber for a few years, and then got on permanent, and I worked in fisheries and wildlife for a few summers, kind of as a seasonal.
Yeah.
And then back into timber, and then the funding just kind of died out there. And they had a guy over in the engineering department that was going to be retiring, and so I kind of went over to help him doing some projects and worked with him one summer doing the trail work. And then when he retired, I applied for that job and was able to get it. And that was about 11, 12 years ago now. So I've been doing trails engineering for about 12 years. So not really using my fish and wildlife degree, but I'm just loving it though. I'm working in the woods by myself most of the time, except with some contractors. I work whatever schedule I need to, just as long as I'm getting the work done and putting a lot of hours in. And I try to minimize my time in the office, putting up with the
paperwork
government
shuffle
BS that you deal with in the federal government. Yeah. I just have to get out of there sometimes or I go crazy. You know how that is.
You aren't going to get fired for saying that, are you?
No, I think everybody in the Forest Service agrees that there's a lot of BS that goes on.
I don't have to edit that part out of the podcast.
I don't think so, but they already know how I feel. I love my job, but I just, there's things working for a big company like that, and the paperwork and the meetings and I just want to get in the woods and get something done.
Right.
See something completed at the end of the
day. So I saw out on your Instagram page, and if you want to or don't want to, you can tell the audience how they can sign up to follow you on Instagram, but you had some really cool pictures back in the day when you're doing a lot of fire stuff.
Well, first off, Instagram's only been 2 weeks now, I think, that I just signed up. I've been on Facebook for a while and kind of minimized all my stuff on there. But this whole social media thing has been working well, selling my knives and then some other things going on in my life. It's been good to share and meeting a lot of great people. So I signed up on Instagram. It's at Todd_Orr. And you can find me on Instagram. And I just started posting some different pictures, a little bit of everything, trying to reach out to everybody out there. And I just posted a picture a few days ago about some forest fire stuff and a photo that I'd taken on a fire just out of Bozeman here not too long ago. Yeah,
and you were telling me that you used to be the guy in charge of finding the hot spots and sending the ground crews in to...
Yeah, for a number of years, if you're with the Forest Service, you're just kind of obligated to work in fire during fire season if needed. Yeah. And I loved doing the infrared work, and it would be both on the ground and out of a helicopter. And the helicopter was great. They'd take the door off the helicopter, and so you could look out and look straight down on the fire. And back in the day, we didn't have like a harness or any safety thing hooked up to you. You just duct taped the seatbelt buckle shut so it couldn't come loose and you wouldn't fall out, which feels totally safe. So you just keep it kind of loose, but enough to hold you in, duct tape the buckle shut. You put your foot out on the skid, so you're pretty much leaning all the way out of the helicopter against that seatbelt, and then you're holding the infrared equipment, looking straight down about 200 feet off the ground, just above the trees, and the helicopter's hovering around, and you're looking for any of the hot spots that'll show up along the perimeter, and then you're GPSing that or putting it on a map and letting the crews on the ground know where it's at so they can try to find those hot spots. Because that fire, you won't see anything on the surface and just a little bit of smoke here and there, but you'll have like a root underground that's burning and hot coals. It'll slowly burn over days or weeks and could burn outside of your line. All of a sudden it'll come back up in a stump.
Oh, gotcha.
Your fire takes off again. So you want to try to get everything out completely. And it's right at the end of the fire usually. So I love doing that, just hanging out of the helicopter and getting some helicopter time early in the morning. As you're heading to the fire, you're kind of scoping out your hunting grounds too as you're heading here and there looking for animals. So that was always good.
Well, people know that I almost won't hunt if I don't have a burn nearby. So you knew where all the burns were, but before Onyx Maps came out with the burn layer, Todd knew every burn in the...
I knew where all the fires were,
That's not fair.
I don't think I used that to my advantage, really, though.
No,
that much.
But which I guess gets into elk hunting, and then this is where I know our audience is going to gain a lot from you because you've been elk hunting forever. Well, not forever, but a long time.
It goes back to when I was a kid. Before I was even hunting, I was out following my dad in the woods, and all during bow season and rifle season, following his footsteps, and he was trying to teach me everything that he knew.
Yeah. And you've been, I don't want, when we have a female guest, we would never ask how old they are, and I don't want to ask how old you are, but people will do the math. If you say, yeah, I've been elk hunting for 40 years.
We already mentioned when I was going to start college, so yeah. I still feel 23, though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, when you look in the mirror in the morning, I'm 53, and I'm like, oh, do I really look that old? I don't feel that old.
Yeah, it was 23 yesterday, 50 today kind of thing.
Yeah. But, so is it fair to say you've been elk hunting for 40 years?
This will be coming up on my 40th year. Been hunting 39 years behind me, I believe. Yep.
Wow. And so the success rate for the average elk hunter in Montana, depending on whether you're looking at all bulls and cows or just bulls only, varies from anywhere from about 8 to 15%. So giving you the benefit of the doubt at 15%, 40 years of elk hunting, you should have shot 6 bulls.
I think I've shot 37. 36 or 36 bulls and 1 cow. I did shoot a cow. My second year, I shot a cow, had a cow tag. Dad talked me into putting in for a cow tag and shot a cow for meat. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, this is not as fun as shooting a big bull. So that's the last time I tried that.
Wow. 37.
37, I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
36, 37.
Do you have all those antlers hanging around somewhere?
I don't. I kept the bigger ones. I've got 2 or 3 of the larger ones, and then a few that I've just cut and kind of woven into some different, all my steps going into my house. I've taken a bunch of antlers and kind of woven into the guard or the rail of the steps.
Yeah. Okay.
And just kind of show them off, and made a lot of knife handles out of some of them. And,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them were, raghorn, small 5-6 point bulls, and I've kept my bigger trophy ones.
Yeah. The first 5 bulls I shot, it took me forever, it seemed like, to kill one. And then it's like, once I killed one, it's like, this isn't that hard. I was making this way more difficult than it needed to be. But then I built a new house and I moved. And I took them down to Pacific, back when they used Pacific Hide and Recycling, used to take antlers. And no, even though they were just little raghorns, I kicked myself. I'm like, why did I do that? I put more effort into that first little 5x4 raghorn.
It's the memories, though, that you have, and telling the stories and maybe the photos that you can look back and,
Yeah. So
I got really spoiled my first year. I'm 12 years old, and opening day of the season, Dad took me out looking for an elk, and he made a kind of a loop through this big, heavy stand of timber, and I was just kind of walking along the outside edge along the meadow, and a little group elk came out with a large, mature 5.5x5 bull. And I ended up shooting him on opening morning about an hour after daylight.
Your first day
My first day ever elk hunting out there, and shot a big 5-point bull. And then the second day, we got that home, got it hung up. And the second day, we went back out just a couple miles from there and ran into a 24-inch muley, about 24 inches wide, and he was about 300 yards up on the hillside, and I was with Dad, and he's like, it's kind of a long shot, if you want to try to chance it, and kind of get down and get a good rest, and he's kind of telling me what I should do, and I'm just had it in the scope, so I just fired off and shot it right in the neck, or I guess it was it wasn't in the neck, it was just below the back, but right above the shoulder, and broke its back, and it dropped. And so the first weekend, I killed a 5x5 bull and a nice 5x5 muley about 24 inches wide. And I went back to school on Monday morning, and all the kids in school like, so did you see anything hunting? It's like, I killed my elk and my deer, and they're just like, wow, and so I was like kind of a god for there at first. I thought, this hunting thing is so easy. And then, after that, you realize it takes a lot more work. That was all luck.
Yeah. A lot of people confuse work and luck and luck and work. And I wish I would have been better at it when I started, but the fact that it took me my 6th season of just pounding the hills and doing every stupid thing. In fact, someone sent me an email the other day and said, you talk about all these dumb mistakes you made when you started elk hunting. Why don't you do a podcast or some video about it? I'm like, well, you don't have enough time to listen to all the dumb things I did. But so maybe that, if I would have shot one opening morning like you did, I'm not sure that I would have. I wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't had all the lessons of failure to learn.
That's how
from,
you learn.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still learning. It's like all the mistakes you make and the things you forget about, and you let your guard down for a second, and it catches up to you, and you I should not have done that. I knew better. Yeah, and you just keep learning.
Yeah. So the reason that I wanted to ask how many elk, and I know before we started this, folks, Todd's a pretty modest guy. He's like, well, I don't want to sound like, I'm trying to brag up how many elk I shot or whatever. But now I'm going to ask Todd the next question, so you'll know why I asked him that question. And those of you who know me know I shoot my elk with a rifle, sometimes with a bow. Todd has shot his last 28 bulls.
28 bulls with a handgun, with a pistol.
Handgun.
Yep.
Think of that, folks. With a handgun. 28 public land mature bull elk with a handgun. That's crazy. So, the reason to me it seems so crazy is I go out to the range here outside of Bozeman, and some of my friends will say, yeah, let's meet out there, and they hand me their handgun. Mm-hmm. I'm a danger to myself and everybody else with a handgun.
It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, anything more than like 3 feet,
you're going to miss.
Yeah, I'm going to miss. So I'm sitting there thinking, all right, how would I hunt elk with one of these? I would be better off with a spear than a handgun. So you got to shoot a lot.
I shoot a lot of practice. I know what my pistol does. I know how far it's going to shoot, what it's going to drop, and having the right gun as well. I shoot a revolver, a Ruger Super Red Hawk with a 9.5-inch barrel, and
really?
And I got a scope on it. I'm shooting a 2-to-7 variable scope on there, and I shoot enough. I know how far it's going to shoot, or where it's going to hit at 100 yards. I know how much it's going to drop at 200. But most of my elk I've shot are all about 100 yards or less, and almost all of them, I think probably all of them, have been in the timber.
Yeah.
So you can't reach out 300 yards. You can't sit on a ridge and try to shoot across some big canyon. It's not going to work. You're in there close. Usually I'm hunting the last couple weeks of the season when I've got tracking snow.
Okay.
And these bulls are either by themselves or in small, bachelor groups. And I'm just hunting that heavy jungle timber, trying to get on one, trying to outsmart him and get a shot at less than 100 yards. That's about what your visibility is in that timber usually.
Yeah. So with that, that gets all these questions running in my mind.
Okay.
What the audience has to say, what cartridge are you using?
44 mag is what I've shot 27 of those bulls with.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. With a revolver?
With a revolver. 44 mag. Mm-hmm. Huh. And I make sure I've got a good shot. I don't take any, stupid shots, running shots. I'm making sure everything's quartering away, good broadside. Yeah, best I can, and I know what the gun will do, and if I don't have a perfect shot, I don't take it. I wait, and so I pass a lot up. I miss a lot of chances, but I spend a lot of time out there in the woods, and I've just all that time hiking out there and trying to move in on those animals and seeing what their habits are, and you just learn kind of what they do and know where to go and what not to do, and the more you hunt, the better you get at it.
Yeah, so. A lot of people are listening saying, Newberg, that's the exact opposite from what your strategies always are, because I'm a glasser. Mm-hmm. I love to glass. I love to go and hunt, either old or new burns. I don't really care. I like to sit on a rock and have like 4 different places I can glass into.
Sure.
Growing up in northern Minnesota in the big woods there, I loved still hunting. Mm-hmm. I loved getting on a fresh track after snow and just going as quiet as I can. Mm-hmm. And you see, this deer is starting to zigzag instead of straight line, and it's like, all right.
He's going to bed down.
Yeah, something's going on here. Kind of like when you're reading elk tracks. If they're just lined out, you can kind of hustle along, but as quick as they start
to meander, they're looking for that perfect spot, a little flat spot behind a tree or something to bed down. I definitely hunt that way as well.
Okay.
A lot of things, looking at them, usually I'm in the snow. I love hunting in snow. It's just I got tracking snow.
Yep.
And I'll cross a lone elk track or maybe a couple, and I'm looking at that track and looking at the size of the track to start with. Yeah. And then looking at the dew claws, and it's like, okay, if those dew claws are really poking down right to the ground or deep into the snow, it's probably a heavier animal.
Yep.
And I'm like, all right, it's a big track. It's 2 claws. Let's start following this and just see what he does. And he's moving along on some trail possibly. And I start looking at the width of the trees, and it's like, all right, he's going right between these trees, or he's going really close to that tree. I'm like, yeah, that's a spike, or it's a, if you think it, pretty sure it's a bull, it's a spike, or it's a little brush head raghorn, and he's just kind of tipping his head and going by him. When I start seeing that meandering, like, okay, he's going uphill 5 feet to get around this tree because it's only 3 feet wide, and it's like, all right, this might be a mature bull. That's something that I want to stick to until I get a look at him.
Right.
If I can look at it and be like, he's walked 1 foot by that tree, it's not worth chasing. I just turn around and go on looking for the next track.
Yeah. And so most often when you do that, do you find them in their bed? Or
either in their bed or feeding. I usually end up catching up to them eventually. I just stick to that track until I see that animal and see if it's worth pursuing or not. And I carry a camera, and I love taking photos of them. So I'll get in there and get a couple photos at 100 yards, and then, working around here, and then try to get a look. Has that got a big fork in the back? Is that worth going in closer? And, or putting the camera away and having the pistol ready. Yeah. And so if I realize it's a raghorn bull or not that big, then I'll just put the pistol away and get the camera out and try to get in and get some photos or video.
Yeah. So you're doing this in Montana, our rifle season runs usually from the 4th Saturday in October to the Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Whatever that 5 weeks. So you can almost take the Sunday after Thanksgiving and go back 5 weeks. That's when season's going to open.
That's about right.
So that's, I have a calendar where I say that elk are early season, pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut, or late season. And I always say November with snow and everything else, they're kind of in their late season pattern. Going into sanctuaries. For me, I usually look at sanctuary as just ugly, nasty terrain or topography. But for you, these sanctuaries are thick, ugly timber.
That's a good place to find them.
Yeah. Nobody wants to go in that stuff.
They're going to be out in those meadows and clearings, at night feeding in the grass. And if you can try to catch them before they get back in that jungle timber. And if I can't catch them out there, then, or at least on the edge of the timber, then you're in that heavy jungle trying to find them. Yeah. And they're amazing animals, how they can get into the thickest, deepest, darkest timber and just hole up in there, and you don't see them until they're 40 or 50 feet away all of a sudden, and you see an eyeball looking at you, and you're, I'm busted. Don't move.
Gigs up. So that's a lot different than archery. I mean, some people would say, oh, well, I hunt with a bow. I got to get close with that. And I get that. But you have the benefit of the rut.
The camouflage, the number of different things there. Where when you're late season, I'm usually working at the Forest Service. We're trying to get as much field work done as we can before the snow flies. So I'm working up until mid-October or 1st of November in the woods, working as much as I can, 50, 60 hours a week. And then finally, when the snow's too deep, then I'm like, all right, I'll take, 6 or 8 days out of the last 2 weeks of the season. That's usually what I get to hunt.
Okay.
And it's usually, the last 2 weeks of November, right up to the end, looking for tracking snow. And most of the people have pushed a lot of those bigger bulls clear back into the high country. So I'm hunting 3, 4, 5 miles back in from a trailhead usually. Yeah. And just try to get away from the people. The farther you go in, the less people there are usually. And that's my strategy.
No, that's very similar to what.
But no one else should do that. They should always stay close to the truck.
Yeah, stay down by the.
Yeah, that's where you want to be. Don't go too far in. I don't need any more competition.
People are going to think I paid you to say that, Todd. So the other thing, you mentioned the camouflage difference, because in Montana, in any firearm season, you're wearing blaze orange.
You're wearing orange. Yep.
You're kind of like the big pumpkin walking around out there, and you're trying to get within really close distance to a very alert and experienced animal.
Yes, it's very difficult.
Seeing the pictures of some of your bulls, these aren't 1.5-year-old or 2.5-year-old bulls for the most part that I've seen in your pictures.
I've shot a few younger bulls, some raghorn, 4, 5, 6 points that were smaller, but the last 2 or 3 I've shot were 350 class bulls.
Yeah, and so those bulls have seen and heard and smelled just about everything. Mm-hmm. You very seldom are going to catch them with their guard down.
No, and I'd say that 9 out of 10 times, I get busted. They see me or smell me, something goes wrong, and you get close, you're almost at that I need 10 more feet and I have a shot. And then that next 10 steps you take, something goes wrong. The wind switches usually, or, you step on a branch that you didn't feel under the snow and it makes just enough noise that their head's up and now they're out of there.
Yeah.
And they're running for quite a ways before they slow down. And then they're always watching behind them too, watching their back, see if you're following or not.
Yeah. In the places where you're hunting them, unlike where I normally hunt them, if they bust, you might get them going through another opening 50 yards away. Mm-hmm. For you, once they're gone, you just hear footsteps after that.
Yeah, I just hear them crashing through the trees. And I'm like, all right, here we go. Let's start following. So for the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm just moving along, trying to catch up a little bit. And then I start slowing down, knowing that they're slowing down. And then sometimes they'll circle back above and be watching down on you. Or after an hour or two of following them, pretty soon they figure you're not there and they start to meander around looking for a place to bed down. Yeah. And the trick is to see them before they see you. That's what I always keep telling myself. It's like, just focus on watching ahead, and I'll take a couple steps and I'll just scan ahead of me. And anything that looks a little different, whether it's a color or a shape, I stop, pull up the glasses, pull up the binoculars, and just take a look and be like, oh, that's a stump, that's a branch, whatever. But, eventually, all of a sudden, you're like, ooh, that's a leg, or that's an eyeball, or that's an ear, and you see that. And I think just over the years of practice, you're able to pick that out, just something a little bit different or the slightest movement. Maybe it's just the flick of an ear or, some little thing. And
so you are hunting in, I'm going to say, as a general rule, most places, your visibility is well under 100 yards.
Yeah, I'd say 100 yards is probably your max most of the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're still using binos. And I bring this point up because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I never hunt where my shots are over 250 yards anyhow, so I don't need binos.
Well, when you're in that thick timber and you've got, a heavy, thick timber, everything, and it's dark because, it's thick enough, you don't get as much light in there, and everything just kind of blends together, and you've got a lot of deadfall, and you've got stumps, and there's so many times that I glass a lot, and then just with my eyes, you don't see anything, you throw up the binoculars, and all of a sudden it's like there's a hind leg sticking between two trees a foot apart. It's like it looked like another tree or a stick until you put the binoculars up. So definitely use those quite a bit in the heavy timber.
Huh. So you talked about how sometimes you bump them and they take off, and then you get on their trail and you follow them. A lot of people would say, well, I'm screwed. They're in the next county, and they just go look for the next elk. You're saying you stay on the trail.
I just stick to them. I'll follow them all day, especially if I haven't got to look at it, but I think it's a bigger bull, then I'll just stick to it for miles. 2 or 3 drainages later, I'm still following this thing, and I jump it 4 or 5 times, and I see antlers moving, but I could never get a good enough look to tell if that was a trophy bull that I want to actually shoot or just take a photo of and go after a bigger one. Right. So I just stick to it until it comes to a point where it's like, I got to get out of here before dark kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, normally you can catch back up to them. I've had most of those bulls I'll catch up to 2 or 3 times if I keep jumping them and messing up.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times I'll jump that bull during the day, or maybe it's a group of bulls, and then try to get back in on them and try to figure out a strategy. And once you get close and, okay, now I see they're bedded down over here. How am I going to get on them? And you're checking the wind, and you're checking the terrain and the timber and the cover. And you're like, okay, I'm going to try to go above them and come down on top and see if I can get a better look and a shot. Or if the wind's wrong, you're going to come in a different direction. Or sometimes you back out and go a mile around to come in and make sure the wind's right for you.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you're on your hands and knees crawling in the snow, and then you're backing out of there really quietly and trying a different strategy. And you come back around and they're not even there anymore because they decided to move another half a mile somewhere. And so you have every situation, and sometimes it works and most of the time it doesn't. But just stick to it and don't give up.
So people often ask me, well, what do people, if you're going to make an elk hunting mistake, what's the most common one? And for me, both when I make the mistake or when I see how others are hunting, the most common mistake I see is people not giving elk enough credit for their nose. I don't know if you see something similar to that, or
definitely. I mean, they have excellent smell, and if the wind's wrong, in their favor, they're going to bust you at 300 yards away for sure, a quarter mile away.
Yeah,
that happens a lot. Probably the mistake that I think I make, I'm usually hunting, so the wind is a favorite for me. And I think the mistake I make most of the time is you've been hiking for a couple hours and you haven't seen any sign and you haven't heard anything, you haven't seen any elk, and you're just like, oh, okay, maybe the next drainage. And so you pick up your pace just a little bit and you let your guard down just a little bit, and you're kind of watching over here. You're not focusing. You're not going as slow as you were. And all of a sudden, as soon as I do that, all of a sudden, boom, an elk steps up in front of me. It's like, had I just stuck to that slow pace and glassing and scanning the trees, I would have seen him first.
Yeah.
And I do that so often, it seems like it's almost like I'm jinxed, to where sometimes I haven't seen elk all day. I'm like, I'm just going to walk fast and make some noise. At least I'll see something today, you know? So that's probably one of my biggest mistakes. So I just have to keep telling myself, slow down, focus, just stop, get your binoculars out, glass again, just move like they're right there in front of you, because you never know, they might be.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking about how much different your hunting is than mine. I mean, we're hunting the same animal, but if we both did a bag dump and a gear dump, they would think that we were hunting on different continents.
Probably.
And we might be hunting the same mountain range.
Right. Sure.
Just different tactics and
totally
style.
Different strategy, different weapon. Yeah.
Mentally, and I'm guilty of this, if I'm not seeing stuff, or I need some positive reinforcement on a regular basis to keep my mind in it, that, yeah, I'm on to it. There are some elk here. There's probably times you hike a long ways without cutting a fresh bull track. And
I do.
How do you mentally, is it just that, look, I know I've done this enough that sooner or later I'm going to cross one? Or
that's kind of it. It's like you just don't give up. And I love exercise. So at the worst case scenario, I'm like, oh, I'm getting a great hike and get some exercise today. I don't have to go to the gym tonight when I get home. So, and you just know that, or not knowing if that bull's going to be the next ridge over, or the next drainage, or the next stand of timber. And I just being positive and be like, oh, it could be there. That might be the spot. I've seen them there before. If they're not here, they might be there. And so I'll just keep going, and usually try to do a big loop. I might do 15, 20 miles in a long day, and for sure never less than 10 or 12 probably.
Right.
And you're just covering country, and I never sit down and like just sit there and glass like you're talking. Right. To sit out in the open somewhere. I'm just constantly moving. I don't have the patience to sit very often. So I'm just moving, covering country. If there's elk not here, maybe they're in the next drainage. And I'm looking up at the next mountain going, ooh, it's going to be a nasty hike over there, but there could be elk on the other side, so I'm going for it.
Well, that gets me to the question of, I've never got an elk out whole in my entire life. I've never got an elk out in one piece. I ask a lot of people that, and some have, some haven't. The way you're describing your hunting, I suspect the majority of yours come out on your back in pieces.
I think that first bull I shot when I was 12 years old, we were able to drive to that. It was back in like the 70s, and the road came right down the ridge, and you could drive about anywhere. And we backed up to that, threw it in the back of the little Toyota Land Cruiser Jeep. But I think every bull I've shot since then, every elk, has been boned out and packed out on my back.
Yeah. And that's just a mindset. I think that the sooner people get to the mindset of, this is how I'm going to have to do it. It's going to be work. It's going to take a few days. But once you're there mentally, it doesn't bother you. And that's when my elk hunting success seemed to start getting better. And I'll admit that when I first moved out west, I was intimidated that something's going to spoil if I shoot it here. I can't drag an elk. I see them at the meat processor. I'm like,
these whole animals. You wonder how
am I going to drag
been?
that out of there? And so I'll admit that the first few years of my elk hunting, my lack of knowledge about how to quarter and bone and pack one out is what kept me from going where the elk most likely were. Mm-hmm. I was just hunting. I was that guy you're wishing would stay closer to the trailhead.
Right.
And I'm always hunting on the uphill side of the trailhead. Like, well, if I had some snow, I might be able to skid him out, or at least if I cut him in half, me and two buddies could skid out a half. And so
I think I gave up worrying about that long ago. I just know that where places I go, it's like you just expect I'm going to bone it out. I carry, I have my pack with me. I have plastic bags with me, everything I need. I carry a little like 5x7 blue tarp in my pack, and I'll lay that tarp out on the ground there so I can cut meat out, and I lay it on that tarp, just spread it out so it cools while I'm boning the animal out.
Yeah.
And after everything's cut out, the meat's cooled down, then I throw it in plastic bags and take a load out right there and then come back for the rest.
Yeah.
That little tarp is handy, I'll tell you. Just, even if you got snow, you throw a chunk of meat out there, and about 10 minutes later, it's melted right to the pine needles, and you got pine needles and moss all over your meat. And I just lay everything on a little plastic tarp. It weighs like a half a pound, and doesn't take up much room. It works pretty slick.
Cool. Well, there you go, folks.
Cool the meat out that way.
Send Todd a tip for that tip he gave you. We'll give you his mailing address. You can all of this free information you're getting here. You're more than welcome to send gratuities to Todd or buy a knife from him. But you brought I asked you to prepare kind of a talking point of elk hunting stories you might want to talk about, and you showed up with a long list. I'm like, holy
I didn't
cow,
know. You said you wanted to talk for a long time, so I didn't know for sure what you wanted to talk about, but I just wrote down a couple bullet statements there about different hunts that I've had that were kind of exciting.
So folks, there's some on this list that I got to hear more about. The one that there's a few exotic things. A mountain goat with a pistol, a moose hunt with a pistol.
Mountain goat, I didn't shoot with a pistol.
Right.
But I tried. I had some great time chasing them, but I just never found one.
What did you say you thought, even though you thought some of them might be duplicates?
I think it was like 136 or something goats I saw, and I think I hunted for like 13 days just off and on that last couple weeks of the season or 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
And 3 feet of snow up in goat country, and it's just, see anywhere from 10 to 20 goats a day. Yeah. And just couldn't find a big billy, or I couldn't tell. I up there on the side of the mountain in a blizzard trying to figure out if this is a big goat worth shooting or not.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm not taking a chance and pass them up. And
So you were telling me some of the places that you hunted that goat. I've hunted elk in there, and I was telling Todd, I've seen some bulls there that I've glassed, and I said, I don't need one that bad. Do you use trekking poles or not?
I don't. No.
You don't?
I don't. No. I just get out there an hour before daylight and start hiking in the dark and get up as high as I can in that high country. And hunting with a pistol, I can keep that in a shoulder holster when I get to into some rough stuff where I need both hands to climb up over a rock or a cliff or pull yourself over some deadfall, and that's kind of handy.
Yeah, that's definitely something. Or the guy who's always trying to pull the sling of his rifle back over his shoulder,
always falling off, and
he's cussing it. And,
that's a nice thing about a pistol.
So. Did you shoot your moose with your pistol?
I did. I drew a moose tag about 8 years ago. I've been trying for like 25 years. Finally drew a moose tag. And I just wanted to try to get out there and find a big bull to start with. Yeah. And so I got out early in the season, a couple days here and there. And I passed up 3 or 4 medium-sized bulls looking for a big mature bull.
Yeah.
And towards the last maybe 2 weeks of the season, middle of the season, I saw one big bull that I tried to get on, and just maybe like 45 plus inch bull, big mature moose. And I'm trying to work in on him, and he was just too smart, and just the wind was swirling kind of thing in the afternoon. Just could not get on him, couldn't get a shot, and ended up running him over the side of the mountain. He disappeared, never quit running for like 3 miles, which is usually you jump a moose and they'll run a couple hundred yards and stop. I'm like, okay, I'll get another chance at this guy. Yeah. And I follow his tracks, and he never quit running for literally 1.5 miles or 2 miles, and then he crossed onto private property, so I had to give up on him. But so anyway, I passed up a few smaller bulls that I had a chance at with a pistol. I'm just like, I'm holding out for a big one. It's my once in a lifetime possibly here. Yeah. And about the last week of the hunting season, I got the flu, and I rarely get sick, but I got the flu and hit me pretty bad, and I was just down. I couldn't do anything. And I'm just like, this is my moose tag season, And finally, it was the last day of the season, and I'm like, I still wasn't feeling very good, but I'm a little bit better. I'm like, I have to get out and try. Yeah. And I had 2 or 3 inches of fresh snow, and so I got out at daylight and did about a 3 or 4 mile hike into the mountains. And fresh snow, and I cut a moose track. And I'm like, that looks pretty good size, but who knows what it is for sure. So I'm like, best bet is just to follow this thing. And I got on his track, and I followed him for probably 3 miles of just him wandering. He must have been wandering around all night. Yeah. And finally caught up to him at about 9 or 10 in the morning. And, it was 100 yards, and he was bedded, and he might have heard me coming or saw me move. But I stepped out, saw him at the same time, and he stood up, and I saw it was a not a big bull, but it was like smaller than a couple I'd passed up earlier in the season. But I'm like, all right, last day of the season, here's my bull. And I knew I had about 1 second he was going to run. And I just pulled up offhand shot with a pistol and busted him and hit him just perfect. And he ran maybe 70, 80 yards and went down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when you were saying that, I'm like, that's not going to be any fun to pack out a Shire's moose.
No, it was probably, let's see,
especially if you got
four and a half, maybe 4.5 miles in from a trailhead, 4 miles anyway, 3 miles up a trail, and then about 1.5 miles back off the trail up onto the top of the ridge. And so I spent the rest of the day, got him all boned out, meat cooled off, and I packed up one large backpack full of everything I could carry, put my backpack, and took that out that night. And usually I'll go back in by myself the next day and pack elk out, or I'll get one buddy to come in with me if there's one available. But on a moose, I'm like, all right. So I got 3 other guys to come in with me. They're like, I'll take off work for that. So there's 4 of us, and we hiked back in at daylight the next morning and got up there, and all 4 of us filled our packs, and we were able to get it back out with one trip. So that was definitely nice.
So really heavy pack
5
load.
pack full. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. My son drew a Montana moose tag last year, and it only took him 16 years. It took you 25. Last year was my 27th year.
Okay. Your day's coming.
Due, right?
Yeah, you are. Okay. Maybe this year. So.
And he shot that thing out there about mile and a quarter, mile and a half, and it was flat. And that was a bit of a grunt.
Oh, yeah.
Get that thing out of there. I told him he should have shot that little paddle horn one right next to the road instead of this great big ugly thing out here in the bog. But
well, the funny thing about the moose hunt for me, spending my life out there bow hunting and rifle hunting, and you run into moose occasionally, and usually they stop and look at you, and you walk up there and you're like 50 yards, and they kind of trot off, and they stop and watch again what you're doing. Usually they're an easy animal to get on, and they're not really afraid of you or anything. And so I'm like, finally drew my moose tag. I'm like, all right, this is going to be just an easy meat thing. It's not going to be really any hunting. It's just going to be get out there, find a moose, shoot it, pack it out, have a freezer full. That's kind of my thought process. I wasn't excited about it because I enjoyed the hunt so much, and I thought this was going to be more of just shooting and not really hunting. So I get out there, and it just turned out that almost every elk or moose that I got into that year was like as hard to hunt as an elk. I mean, they'd see me at 200 yards and take off running, and I'm having to actually sneak in on them, and not one of them was ever stopping and giving me a second chance after I jumped them. So it turned into like really fun hunting, and I really enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, right now we're trying to process this meat. Well, it's processed. We're trying to get this moose moving through our freezer. And we're doing it little pieces at a time. I shared it with the camera guys so that it got split a few ways, but man, that's good stuff.
Oh, moose is excellent. Yes, moose and elk both.
Yeah.
My 2 favorite.
My goodness. I would pack more moose meat if I got. In fact, this is a standing call to anyone. As long as you don't shoot them where Todd shot his. If you shoot it within 1 mile of a road, you can call me. I'll come and help pack it if I get some of it.
That's a good deal.
Oh man, it's tremendous.
It is. It's
quality. It's got a slightly different texture to it. Not much different, but a noticeable difference between elk or deer. And it's kind of a smoother. The taste of it comes closer to antelope for me than it does elk. But oh man. It's good stuff.
It's good. Too bad we can only get one every 25 years.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. But as you were saying that, some people are probably wondering, and I asked you the question a while back when a year ago, we met for breakfast or something. And you told me the reason you got into handgun hunting is you ruined your shoulder.
Yeah, I screwed my shoulder up back in, like 1990, I think it was, somewhere back in there, early 90s. And I got into snowboarding, and just the snowboarding thing had just started, and I was up on the hill snowboarding and got into doing all this freestyle jumping and crazy stuff, and went off a jump and fell forward on both of my arms and dislocated both my shoulders and ended up tearing a bunch of tendons out my shoulder, or some tears. And I was in college and he didn't have any really good insurance,
Right.
so I didn't worry about it. I'm kind of like, that'll heal up, you know. And so I went for months with this arm I could barely move, and it finally kept getting better, but I could never pull a bow again.
Yeah.
And I'd end up find out later, years later, that I just tore the heck out of it. But
So that's
I suffered through it. So that got me into like, okay, I'm gonna get into pistol hunting a little bit more now.
Okay.
And I think I'd got a pistol just before that and just kind of taken it out to try it. I thought about pistol hunting. I like the challenge more than a rifle.
Yeah.
But once that happened, then I had to give up the bow hunting completely. And then I just focused on the pistol and put the rifle away and haven't used it since. And so I've been pistol hunting for, I don't know, almost 30 years now, I guess, or 28 years.
So when I moved to Montana 27 years ago, at least in this part of Montana, for about the first 6 or 7 years, the mule deer hunting was pretty darn good. And then we had that killer winter of 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the mule deer just had...
I don't see the muleys I used to. Back when I was a kid in high school and college, and I used to get out every evening after work. We'd go up in the mountains and just take a ride looking, and you'd see a half a dozen nice, mature bucks. You're like, wow, that's a nice buck.
Right.
And every once in a while you'd see a monster, a trophy size.
Yeah.
And I remember chasing those all the time when I was a kid. I remember in high school, I worked at the Bar 7 Ranch over by Ennis.
Okay.
And we'd work all day on the ranch, and then I'd go up, instead of going home in the evening, I'd just take off up the mountain, and we just set a camp up there and just spend the whole evening glassing for elk or mostly mule deer, and then camp there that night so that you could get up at daylight and have like an hour to like scout muleys and then drive back down the mountain and go to work. I just did that constantly in the last few weeks of the summer before hunting season, just try to figure out where the animals were, and we just live on the side of the mountain and back and forth to work every day.
Cool.
Yeah, always looking for those big muleys, but no, I don't see them as much anymore. I mean, I see occasional one, but not like I used to.
Yeah, and one of your stories here, you were talking about a buck you shot at age 13.
My second year hunting, yeah. And the first year I shot that 24-inch muley with second day of the season. My second year hunted, that was the first or the only cow I shot. I shot a cow elk that second year. And then I was just looking for a buck towards the end of the season. And I was with a friend that was my age as well, and my dad. And we'd gone over the top of the mountain and hunted some new area I'd never been in before. And I'm hunting with this buddy, and he'd already shot his deer. And we're kind of going along, and he's like, I'm going to split up and kind of walk around here and look around. And he was looking for an elk, I believe. And I'm like, just looking for a mule deer buck. And I came over a ridge, and I peeked over, and here's this huge muley bedded down in the timber about 200 yards on the other side of the canyon. And I hunkered back down real quick so he wouldn't see me. I'm like, okay, how am I going to get a shot at this guy? And so this is with a rifle. And I stepped up to the edge of there's kind of a little cliff there, and I got up along the edge of the rocks and kind of leaned over ready to shoot, and he's not there. He's gone. He had seen me when I just peeked my head up. He saw me when I peeked my head up over the rock. So he took off through the timber, and so I stepped up and looked, and he's running straight away from me. And he's probably 250 yards. But as a 13-year-old kid, I'm all excited. It's the biggest buck I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, oh, he must be way out there. I better hold the foot over his head, And so I shot a couple times, and he disappeared over the ridge. I'm sure I shot between his antlers right over the top of him. I was really excited. And so I'm like, all right, got to go get on his track. And there was a little bit of tracking snow, and I followed his tracks for a couple miles. And he'd get up to the next ridge and then be watching for me. And I'd come up over the ridge just huffing and puffing. As you're a kid, you're just trying to catch up, and you're almost running. And here's this this deer over there, and I got no chance to shoot at him, to hit him. And he's 300-400 yards away, and he'd run over the next ridge. And finally, I get a shot at him. And I'm just really not doing it the way I should be. I'm not. I'm working my way up to the ridge slowly and letting my breath come down. I'm like, and I shoot, and I end up shooting a front leg out from under him. I think it's the only animal I've ever wounded that actually I didn't kill within 100 yards after shooting it. Shot his front leg out. And I think I'd shot a couple times and finally blew a front leg out, and he went over the ridge, and I had ran out of ammo. I didn't have any bullets left. And so I'd caught up, the friend had heard me shoot, and he caught up to me, and I'm like, it's the biggest buck I've ever seen. He went over the ridge here. So we got on his tracks and came around the ridge, and here that buck was with just one leg, or front leg blowing off. And he's on a really steep hillside, and he kind of fell down and went into this big juniper bush and was hung up in this bush. And This is kind of a gory story. You may want to edit it out. I don't know. But
well, anyhow,
you
finished him off.
But so we got up there and don't have any bullets left, and you got two 13-year-old kids with a 33-inch mule deer, 6x6, 33 inches wide, and we're not going to let this thing get away, and I don't want it to suffer any longer. So we got up there like, what do we do? So here's this buck. He's kind of hung up in a bunch of this juniper tree. And we just got this big rock and just smashed him on the head and kind of stunned him. And then I jumped on his back and I'm holding the antlers. And my buddy Mike is in there with a knife and cuts its throat. And it flips me over the top. And we took about 2 or 3 minutes of cutting his throat. 2 kids on top of this deer.
Oh,
we finally bled him out, and that was it. But yeah, so I wasn't proud of that one, but we finished him in the end. He didn't suffer for too long.
Yeah,
but he was 6x6, 33 inches wide. So.
That's remarkable in so many ways.
Had I had a helmet camera back in the day, it would have been a good story. These 2 kids that are just out of control trying to kill this monster buck.
Yeah. Well, when you said he's the biggest buck you've ever seen, he might have been the biggest one you've ever seen even to date.
I've seen a couple larger ones, but I've never shot one that big. Yeah. I've seen a couple. I saw it's back when I was in high school. And it was right before bow season, and we were scouting for animals, like I was saying, always up on top of the mountain. And I saw this buck that it's like a 4x4 with a brow tine, but each of the 4 on each side forked. So it was a perfect 9x9. And he would turn sideways and just looked like one antler. I mean, it was like a perfectly matched. And I'm guessing he was, pushing 36 inches wide.
Holy cow.
And I saw him 3 different times. One time I had a spotting scope on him, got a good look at him. It was before bow season, and we're like, and he's always within like a half a mile of the same place.
Yeah.
Like, I know right where I'm going to hunt. And so spent most of the hunting season with a bow there and never did see him, of course, and never did see him during rifle season. But I got a photo of him, actually. I mean, old school camera, but you can kind of look at it and see that he's, 30 plus inches wide and that tall and 9 on the side. Just an amazing buck.
Did you ever hear old story of anyone shooting
I never
him?
heard of anybody shooting him or anything. I mean, you would think that would have gone around had someone. I mean, he was a world-class buck there.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that.
Well, if you look at the Montana record book for non-typical mule deer, they came not too far from where you grew up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without telling the audience all the details, actually they were shot a couple of years apart.
Wow.
And then by the same family.
We used to see some monster bucks, just back when I was a kid in high school and even early into college. See a half a dozen big muleys, and I was always, my goal was I wouldn't shoot anything under 24 inches wide.
Yeah.
Was my goal. And so every buck I've shot, I think I've shot one buck under 24 inches, shot one like 22 inches wide, a nice 5x5, but everything else I've shot was always 24 or better.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I'm sure someone smarter than me can solve it or explain it, probably not solve it, is mule deer just across the West. I mean, when I went to college in Nevada in the 80s, man, I saw some really nice deer, and I saw a lot of deer. And now I go back there and hunt, and with cheatgrass, pinyon juniper, competition of wild horses that are really hard on the water, what little water is there, these invasive plant species, so many things that, at least in that part of the world, mule deer, I think when I was there, they said Nevada that year, it was like 250 or 260,000 mule deer they thought they had in the state. Now it's under 100,000.
Wow.
Mostly because
quite the decline.
Yeah.
I think a lot of hunting pressure too, especially around here in Montana.
Yeah.
I mean, back when I was in high school and bow hunting, and I started bow hunting when I was 14.
Oh, yeah.
And back hunting in high school. And you're out there, and if I ran into somebody, it was my dad or one of my 3 buddies I knew from school.
Yeah.
That's usually only people you ever see. And now bow hunting is just huge, and a lot of people,
a lot of pressure, and it makes you wonder how long Montana can continue with as much opportunity as it provides before the resource starts.
Right. Yeah. I think there's going to have to be some changes over the coming years, just number of tags or price of tags, just to kind of limit that. You're going to have to do something.
I don't
too many people anymore.
What the answer is, and then we have shoulder seasons, and then we have all these other things. Poor elk.
Yeah.
They're getting hunted hard.
They are
hard.
Yeah, and predators as well.
Yeah, predators. What do you consider a predator?
For a wolf or for me? I mean, for an elk. On an elk, I guess a predator. A grizzly bear and a wolf is a good predator to an elk. And to me, it's usually a grizzly bear. It seems this last year or so.
Oh, that's a good segue, Todd. I didn't mean to make it that way.
I guess we're leading right into that now, aren't we?
Yeah. So we get so many questions about grizzly bears. A lot of our content is elk centric, and people know that I hunt grizzly country a lot. And there's a lot of people, and I get it. They say, can you give me some ideas of where to go in Montana or Wyoming? But I don't want to go where there are grizzly bears. Okay, I get that. And then the next thing they say is, and I don't want to go where there are a lot of hunters. And I want there to be a lot of mature elk. Well, as quick as you said you aren't willing to hunt where there are grizzly bears,
the just other took out half of the state right there.
Right. Yeah. And you also have, through that process, said, I'm going to force, by saying it that way, what's left is where there's greater density of hunters and lower density of elk. It just,
and a lot more private land, which you have to get access on as well.
Yeah. So this gets to those of you. When did this happen? October of
16, year and a half ago.
Yeah. Unless you were living under a rock or did not have a Facebook account, it was funny when we were on the road filming, and the camera guy shows me his phone. He's like, "Look at this." I'm like, shit, I think that's Todd Orr. But you were so mangled and bloody, I couldn't. And then I could hear you talking. I'm like, I'm sure that's Todd. And so not everyone, but I bet you most of our viewers.
Many people there. I think my little video I did had 39 million views in 48 hours, if I recall.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And I didn't even know what a viral video was up until then. So I learned real quick.
So so we're going to get into this, folks. And afterwards, if you haven't seen it already, you can go out on Facebook or you can go to all kinds of places and type in Todd Orr grizzly bear attack video. And it's a video Todd took of himself. Was it when you were almost to your vehicle?
It was at the trailhead, at the safety of the vehicle. Yeah. I wasn't stupid enough to stop up on the side of the mountain and do a selfie. I waited till I got to where I felt safe anyway.
Yeah. So Todd had been mauled by a grizzly bear, and he was on his way to the Madison County Hospital to get patched up. And so he's told me this story, but for the benefit of our audience, I could listen to it 100 times. I mean, it's a sit on the edge of your seats kind of story. And when you tell it, I want to hear it from start to finish, but I'm thinking, is the audience listening going to say, that's why I don't hunt grizzly bear country, Newberg, you idiot? That's going to be you someday.
That's a good reason,
but,
for sure.
I mean, before we get into that, in your line of work, it's not like this is the first grizzly bear you ever encountered.
No, I mean, I spend every day at the Forest Service working in the field, and everywhere around here is grizzly bear country. Yeah. And on weekends, I'm hunting or I'm hiking or backpacking, camping in grizzly bear country as well. And I just grew up in that kind of an atmosphere, and I was always aware of it. I was always careful, try to do the right things and not make mistakes and get yourself in trouble. But you know it's out there, you know it could happen. Right. And you just hope that it doesn't, and the odds are against you getting attacked. Yeah. And so I see probably average a dozen bears every year in the during the summer season. Yeah. There's maybe a couple grizzly I'll see, and mostly black bears. But I run into a lot of bears. I've had a couple bluff charges, a couple close calls, but I've never, had anything that was like this. And usually you see a bear, they might be curious, look at you a little bit, and they go the other direction, or they'll run right away. And I've had a couple that I just ran into too close or saw with cubs that might bluff charge you. But usually, 50 feet or something, they stop, they look at you, they snap their jaws, they stand up, they take off, they get out of there, get safety for the cubs.
Yeah.
And things just kind of all went wrong this time.
Sometimes it's just bad luck.
It is.
I mean,
wrong place, wrong time, wrong bear.
Yeah. I've told you the couple encounters I've had where I think they were just absolute good luck. I walked into a bear, and it's like how it happened so quickly both times. How could that bear be that close to me without me having seen or heard it before now? And the good luck is both times, I think they were boars. They turned and they took off. No encounter, no bluff charge, nothing.
Right.
Other than me getting to test how well my arteries are working. I don't know what your blood pressure spikes to for that instance, but
yeah, in that situation, you're definitely, your heart's going and adrenaline's flowing for sure.
So as good of luck as that was in those two encounters for me, sometimes it's bad luck too. And they're just, you can do all the right things. You can be as experienced as you are. I mean, if you took the whole pool of people who stomp these woods in Montana, you're probably even further than that 1% of the experience.
Spent most of my life in the woods, and in that situation, I've had classes and I've done a lot of reading and studying. Back in college, when I was in college, I wanted to be a large carnivore biologist. Was kind of where I wanted to go with my degree. And I did some bear studies up in Glacier Park. I've done carnivore studies in Yellowstone Park over the years, and I've read just about everything there is to read about them. And then just my time in the woods, just studying what they do and seeing how they react and knowing what you should and shouldn't do. So I feel fairly confident. And this thing is, when you're in a situation like that, what will you actually do? Right. Will that come back to you, or will you panic and run and scream, or pass out, or what's going to happen? And I don't think anybody really knows. There's so many people out there who be like, I would have done this, I would have done that. But it's like, it's a lot different when you're out there and you've got a 400-pound animal coming at you at 35 miles an hour with teeth and claws, and that can kill an elk easily, or a bison or whatever. And all of a sudden you're in its path. How are you going to react?
Yeah, and that's not the time where you get the opportunity to say, well, in the manual on page 6, they said no time to do that, or should I do that, or should I? No.
It's got to be something that just comes instantly. It's like what you've trained to do, or what you've thought in your head. And you're going to react that way. Yeah. And hopefully you do it the right way.
So we don't need to give exact locations or anything, but you've told me this story, so act like I've never heard it before, but you'd left the trailhead and were you out scouting?
It was a Saturday morning, and I'd been working a lot the whole season for the Forest Service doing my trail work, and I finally had a day off, and like, okay, I'm going to get out on Saturday and just look around, just try to scout some elk before rifle season, before the general season. And so I got to the trailhead about an hour before daylight. I'm always hiking in the dark, so I want to be in the high country at daylight, because that's your best chance of seeing something. And so I got to the trailhead at daylight, started hiking up along the drainage along the creek, and about every 30 seconds or so, I'd just yell out, "Hey, bear, coming up the trail." Just in the dark, you don't want to run into something. And, I've hiked up there, hunted up there numerous times, see sign, but I've never had an issue. But I got about 3 miles up the trail. It was right at daylight, and I stepped out into kind of an opening, a clearing there along the creek. And about 80 or 100 yards up the creek at the other end of the meadow, Grizzly and sow Grizzly with 2 cubs steps out at the same time. And we kind of see each other at the same time. And she immediately turns and just runs up the ridge and disappears over the ridge into the trees. So I'm thinking to myself, this is great. That's a good bear. She doesn't like people. She's going that direction. I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'll never see her again. Yeah. And so I waited about a minute. She didn't come out, didn't see her, so I started hiking again and took just a few steps, and I heard a noise, and I turned, and she had dropped the cubs and came around the ridge and came in behind me. Ooh. And I turned, and she was maybe 35 yards coming down the ridge in a full charge, and her ears are laid back. It's kind of grass and brush, and she's just flying through this stuff. You can see like the tops of the brush and the grass flying. She was just wide open.
Oh, my gosh.
Just from what I know from bears, 99% of the time, or 90% of the time, whatever it is, they bluff charge. They're not going to attack you. It's rare. And so I'm thinking that's probably a bluff charge, but just in case. And I just instinctively pulled my bear spray, and I had bear spray hanging right on a chest holster on the front of me. And I just instantly pulled the bear spray out. At the Forest Service, not allowed to carry a handgun because I'm not law enforcement. So bear spray is my only protection, and I'm out there for 20 years doing this stuff. And so you've practiced with bear spray. I'm just used to that. I've thought about it. So I instinctively pulled the bear spray and pulled the safety out and looked back up, and now she's covered that distance in that 2 seconds, and she's 30 feet coming wide open still. And I just started spraying and walking backwards and spraying, and just half a second, she's through the spray and I'm right there. So she's instantly on top of me, and she bites me 5 or 6 times on my right arm and shoulder. And then
is that because you kind of put your arm up?
I went down on my face. And
okay.
Yeah, when I sprayed, and then right when she came through it, I just turned away from her and then went down on the ground on my face, and my hands up behind the back of my neck, protect my neck and the side of my face.
Okay.
And so her first bites were right in my right arm and shoulder. And then within 3 or 4 seconds, the bear spray is getting to her now. And it, just her adrenaline running as well. I think just it didn't affect her instantly. It just took a second or two and her momentum, and then she was on me. But so she started coughing from the bear spray and immediately turned and ran off. And I'm like, wow, I picked myself up. And I remember, the bear spray was still kind of in the air, and I moved down the trail a little bit and kind of like looking at my arm going, okay, I've got puncture wounds. I'm going to have to go to the hospital, get some stitches. But wow, I just survived a grizzly attack.
Yeah.
And so I started down the trail and thinking that was the end of it.
So at this time, you were scouting. Did you have your pistol with you?
I was carrying, I had a 10 mm with me.
Okay.
Yeah. And it really, I wasn't that concerned for bear protection. It was more of, I had a wolf tag, and wolf season was open.
Right.
And I've never shot a wolf, and I'd like to try to shoot a wolf with a pistol someday.
Okay.
And so I had that 10 mm, and I've got a scope on it that I've actually could hunt with. And so I'm like, well, if I get a chance, I'll shoot a wolf. So that's why so it wasn't a good gun to even use for bear protection because I've got a scope. You can't, it's a longer barrel, just a number. I got scope covers on it, the whole works. It wasn't a quick draw bear protection.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so I made the decision to pull that bear spray, and at that point I had 2 seconds, and it was just too late to even think of drawing a gun anyway. It was just over. All of a sudden she's on top of me.
Yeah.
And so I started down the trail. And
you've picked up your this whole time. Did you have your bear spray in your hand, or had
I think when
I
think when I went down and she was on top of me, I dropped the bear spray and had my hands wrapped around my neck. So I picked up my bear spray and had that in my hand, and thought, okay, taken down the trail. And I went maybe 6 or 8 minutes, or 500 yards down the trail kind of thing. And the trail goes right along the creek, and it's fairly noisy. And so I just walking along the creek, heading down to the hospital, and just all of a sudden I heard a noise behind me, and I'd been looking around. I'm a little nervous, obviously,
for sure.
but thinking, okay, I bear sprayed her. She's gone. I'm going the opposite direction. And all of a sudden I hear a noise, and I turn, and I think what happened is she had gone over the ridge, got the cubs, and then heading straight kind of away from me. But there was a big canyon there that's really choked with brush and a steep canyon. The cubs were cubs of the year, really small.
Okay.
And so I think instead of crossing that canyon, she just decided to come down the ridge that was fairly open to get away from me, thinking I'm still back up there. And I'm coming down the draw thinking she's up there. And I think we just V'd together, just random bad luck.
Bad luck.
And she saw me, and that's my assumption. She sees me down below on the trail, and she's like, I'll get him this time. She's recovered from the bear spray, and now... So I hear this noise, I turn, and she's 10 or 15 feet behind me coming wide open. And I didn't hear her until she was that close, just because of the noise from the creek. And my hearing's probably not as good after all these years of shooting and everything else, too. But, and there was no time to even spray. It's like I turned the corner of my eye, there it is. And I just basically turned back away from her, and she knocked me down. And I'm on my face in the dirt again, and throwing my hands up behind the back of my neck, trying to pull my arms in around to protect the sides of my face and my vitals, and I'm just hunkered down. And the first bite was on my left forearm, and I heard and felt the crunch of the bone. It's just like this, and that made me kind of wince, and I was like, and I pulled my arm away. And when I moved and made that noise, she just turned into like a frenzy of biting, and she's just all over me and ripped me and shaking me around. And so I knew that if I tried to fight back or make any noise or anything, she's just going to keep tearing me up.
Right.
So I'm like, I kept telling myself, you just got to play dead, block out the pain, don't move. She's going to leave. And so I'm face down, put my arm back up, protect the back of my head again, and face down in the dirt, and she's picking me up, and I said it was kind of like a sledgehammer with teeth. She'd pick me up and shake me, and then she'd slam me down, and then she'd not just biting, but forceful biting and slamming me and hitting me. And her claws are buried into my lower back. I have like 6 scars on my lower back right below my backpack where her claws just had me pinned to the ground. And then she'd pick me up again and slam me down. And she bit my right arm and shoulder probably 25 times.
Oh.
And the left arm just bit that a couple times, but that left arm was broke, and I had 2 tendons that had been ripped loose, and they're sticking out, and a lot of nerve damage, and my hand is just useless.
Your left hand?
My left hand, yeah. The right one, I've just got 25 puncture wounds all over my shoulder and in my back. And at one point, she bit me in the side, and it kind of turned me like that, and I could see out of the corner of my eye, her eye and her head and her face like inches away from me.
Oh, man.
And I was just like, just pull it back in. You got to use every bit of strength to keep face down so she doesn't flip you over, get to your face, get to your eyes. You lose an eye, it's it, or one bite in the throat or a claw.
Yeah.
And so I used every bit of strength and survival I had. It's just your body goes into this different mode of you're just so strong and powerful trying to fight that and not let her flip me over. And every time she'd knock me down, I'd roll right back up to my knees face down. And it was crazy.
So you weren't laying like flat on your belly. You were kind of squat.
Yeah, I was hunkered down, squatted down. They say that you should lay flat on your stomach and spread out because it's tougher to flip you. But a bear can just flip an elk or a giant log or rock or whatever. It's like they can flip me over no matter what. Yeah. So, and I didn't really think about that at the time anyway. It's just what felt better to me was hunkered in a ball face down. Yeah. And it protected my I didn't have any bites or wounds on my legs or the lower half of my body. And I think it's because it was kind of underneath me, which is good. So I was able to walk out. But yeah, so all the brunt of the attack was on my arms and my shoulders. That was what the highest point was.
Okay.
And at one point, a claw caught me on the side of the head, and she ripped about a 5-inch gash right above my ear, my scalp, right to the bone. And instantly, my eyes just filled with blood. And I'm hunkered down there, and I don't know what's going on. It's like, how is this going to stop? Is this going to end? But I know there's nothing I can do. I can't fight back. She's just going to tear me up. I'm like, your best bet is to just play dead, don't move, don't make a sound. And it's funny how I remember the pain of the first bite. Yeah. But after that, your adrenaline's flowing. I mean, you're in survival mode. You're telling yourself you have to ignore that pain or she's going to keep chewing on you. And so I don't remember any more pain after that of all these other bites. But I remember my other senses were heightened. I remember how bad she stunk. The smell is just putrid, rotten smell. I remember, I could feel the bite. I mean, you got these big 1.5-inch canines biting into muscle, and you can feel it and hear it. It like crunches. It's a crunching sound. All my other senses were heightened, but I couldn't feel any pain. And I just kept telling myself over and over, don't move. She's going to leave. She's going to go check on her cubs. They don't want to leave her cubs for very long.
Yeah.
And it was like maybe 1.5 or 2 minutes that she was on top of me and biting, and then she stopped. And that was probably the eeriest part of the whole thing is she's got me pinned to the ground. I got all the weight of this bear on me. I can barely breathe.
So she's standing there with her
front legs right on my lower back, and I've just pinned there, and she's sniffing the back of my neck. And I can feel and hear that breath like an inch away from my neck and my hands. And I'm like one bite into my spine and it's over.
Yeah, and you're done.
And I'm just and she would sniff and a little bit, and then she'd bite on my shoulder or bite my arm, and then she'd sniff. And at the end there, it wasn't as deep a bites as it was at first. I think she's kind of testing to see if I'm alive or dead or incapacitated. And it was more like dog nipping you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember over the next week, I had my whole side of my body and my shoulder, my arm was all bruised. And a lot of it were like these bruises in the shapes of teeth scraping and stuff, but not puncture wounds. It was just her nipping and testing me.
Gosh.
So this goes on for 30 seconds. She'd sniff, and then she'd bite, and then she'd sniff and bite. And then finally she just stood there at the end for 30 seconds. And I'm guessing she maybe was looking around, see if there was any other threats, see where her cubs were. And then she just stepped off and disappeared. And so I'm just, I'm like, I don't want to move. I don't know if she's 10 feet away. Right. I can't see, I can't tell what's going on. So I waited maybe 30 seconds just to see if I could hear where she was. And then I didn't hear anything. I'm like, I got to thinking, if she goes and checks on her cubs, they're okay. She comes back again to see if I'm there. A third attack, it's like my arm's broke. It's useless. I don't know if I can survive a third one. So I'm like, I need to do something to protect myself. And so I slowly pulled my hand down from around the back of my neck and my head and tried to reach for my pistol it was in a shoulder holster.
Yeah.
And I remember going really slowly because I didn't want her to see me moving if she was close by. So I'm reaching down for the pistol. It's like, I can't find it. It's not there. I'm like, okay, Todd, focus. Reach for the pistol. You're just panicked.
Yeah.
So I reach again, and the pistol is not there. It had been ripped off of me during the attack.
Oh.
And so now I'm feeling completely...
The first or second
The
attack?
second attack. Second attack. First one, it just bites in this arm. Second one, I was getting thrown around, picked up, slammed down.
Oh, yeah.
And she'd ripped my backpack half off. She'd got the holster had been sticking out kind of under my arm. She'd grab that, rip that off, rip my GPS off, the whole works. But so at this point, I'm like, I have nothing to protect myself now. I'm completely helpless with a broken arm. I can't see.
Yeah.
I don't know how bad my injuries are. And I'm like, I need to do something. And so I slowly reached up, wiped the blood out of my eyes, and I looked each direction, and I didn't see her anywhere. I'm like, okay, she's gone. And then I saw my gun about 10 feet away. So I just basically dove for the gun, pistol out of the holster, and hammer back, and I'm ready. And she was nowhere to be seen. She had disappeared over the ridge. So I just instantly put the pistol under my left arm because I couldn't hold anything with my right hand and arm. It was useless. So I kind of tucked the pistol under my left arm so it was easy to get to, and I had the bear spray in the right hand. And I just headed down the trail, and I'm just like, okay, I just got to get distance. I got to get out of here. And I started moving down the trail, and I probably after like 10 minutes, and I'm feeling pretty safe now that she is gone the other direction. I'm not going to run into her again.
Yeah.
And I stopped and looked at my wounds and just kind of assessed the injuries and be like, do I need to do a tourniquet or some kind of bandaging? How bad am I bleeding? And I could see that I had blood dripping off my elbows, and it's soaking down into my pants, but it's not running. It's no artery severed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I don't need to do any bandaging right now. I can just keep going. I just want to get farther and farther away and feel comfortable. And every step made me feel a little better.
Gosh.
And so I'm like, I can do first aid at the truck if I need to. I'm not going to go into shock. I'm not losing that much blood. And so I had about a 3-mile hike out, about 45 minutes of hiking. I think I stopped maybe once or a couple more times just to double check, make sure I'm not going to bleed out. Yeah. And everything looked fine. So I got to the truck, and first thing I noticed the truck, it's like there's one other vehicle in the parking lot, and I was thinking, I hope no one else, I hope those people don't run into this bear, and have another situation. And then I got to thinking, it's 8:00 on Saturday morning. It's still bow season. There could be someone coming up here for the weekend to camp and go back in there. And I was thinking, I need to write a note and just warn people that there's an aggressive bear up here with cubs.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get in my truck, and I've got like some sticky notes in the console, and I'm going to try to write a note and put it on the bulletin board. And I can barely get in my truck because my left arm is useless, and the right one's starting to cramp up pretty good from all these puncture wounds. And I had a tear in my right shoulder that was about 1.5 inches tear out of that. And so it was hard just to lift my right arm even. The left one is useless completely. So I had a hard time getting in my truck, and I'm trying to get a sticky note out, and I'm just dripping blood everywhere and trying to write a note. And it's like, this is useless. It's not going to be legible. I just can't do it. So I'm like, okay, give up on that idea. And
the true definition of a good Samaritan there. Wow.
So I'm like, all right, time to head to the hospital. And I thought, well, heck, this has kind of been a crazy experience. I better record this real quick before they wash all the blood off and stitch me up. So I've got a couple hunting buddies that at the end of the weekend, we usually kind of send photos, be like, oh, what'd you see? How did your weekend go? And so I was thinking of these two guys basically going, I need to do a quick photo and a video because I got them beat for the craziest weekend. So I did a couple photos of the wounds, and I did a quick 30-second selfie video, and then jumped in the truck and headed towards town, headed towards the hospital. And it's probably 30-minute drive to get to town. And I'm 3 or 4 miles down the road, bumpy dirt road, and there's a rancher. Comes up near some ranches, and there's a rancher out in his mailbox. And so I pulled up and stopped, and I'm trying to get my window down. I can hardly even reach over to get the window down to hit the button, and I'm trying to get his attention and wave at him, and he finally sees me and comes over, and I can see in his eyes, he's like, whoa, what happened, And I said, I just got attacked by a grizzly bear, and I said, I'm just heading to the hospital. Can you call the hospital and just let him know I'm on the way so I don't walk in looking like this and surprise him?
Right.
And he's like, yeah, do you need a ride? And I'm like, well, I'm already bleeding all over in my truck. I don't want to make a mess of yours. And I'm not going to go into shock. At that point, I felt completely safe. I know I'm not bleeding enough to go into shock. And I felt good, really. Except for the pain in my left arm mostly. Right. But so he's like, all right. So he went to call the hospital, and I took off towards town, and it was another 15 or 20 minute drive. And when I got into town and pulled into the emergency entrance there, and there was a sheriff's officer, a doctor, and a nurse standing outside waiting for me. You knew I was coming. And I pulled in there, and at this point, my arms are so cramped up from all the wounds that I can't even get the truck into park.
Yeah.
And I can't reach my arm. I can't lift. I have no strength in that right shoulder. The left arm's useless. So I kind of motioned at the sheriff, and he came over, opened the door, got the truck in park for me, and then I couldn't get the seatbelt off, so he reached over and got the seatbelt loose, and he's like, I'm surprised you took the time to buckle up. And I'm like, well, I just survived a grizzly attack. I don't want to die in a car wreck on the way to the hospital, so not taking any chances. But so they took me into the hospital there, and I walked in. And it was funny when I walked in the door, because everybody knew that was coming. And so there was like anybody that was in the hospital, whether you're patient or that worked there, that could get up and look, was there. There was like a line, and I'm walking down through, and all these people are looking at me like, "What's he look like?" You know?
Oh God!
But they did X-rays everywhere I got bit. They did X-rays to find out if I had any other broken bones, and I just had all in the bone in the left arm. That was the problem. But and then it took about 7 hours, I suppose, of a doctor basically on each side of me just putting stitches in.
Yeah.
And the puncture wounds were, pretty deep. So they had to go down in and put like a stitch in the middle to kind of keep everything together so it wouldn't be a cavity in there. So I had like 3 stitches per puncture wound just to close it up well.
Oh, wow.
And then they spent a lot of time on my scalp. I had that 5-inch gash, and they spent a lot of time stitching that up. So you can't even, all the hair's grown back. You can't even tell until I go bald and lose all the hair there, and then you'll see it. But and then the left arm, the doctor's looking at it, and he's like, yeah, you got a couple tendons that were completely severed, and they're sticking out, and a lot of muscle damage and nerve damage. And he's like, I'm going to close it up for now, but you're going to have to see an orthopedic surgeon tomorrow back in Bozeman. And so he's trying to shove these tendons. They're actually sticking completely out, and he's trying to shove them back in the hole so he can stitch it closed, close it up. And he's like, it was kind of funny because he's sitting there watching this, and he's pushing them in, and he's trying to stitch it, and all of a sudden, boink, they'd pop back out again. He's kind of getting frustrated trying to keep them in there, and finally gets it stitched over and sent me back to Bozeman. And orthopedic surgeon the next day or 2 days later on Monday, and they took a look at everything and said, all right, we're going to have to do exploratory surgery in here and find out what kind of damage you have in that left arm. So that afternoon I was in surgery, and they had to cut each of those. I had 4 major wounds in my left arm. They had to cut each one back open again and a little bit larger to try to get in there and find out what kind of damage there was, clean it out well.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to watch the whole thing. I'm totally interested in this, So they just gave me a local shot in the armpit just to numb that arm.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you want a little bit of drugs just to kind of mellow you out? And I'm like, no, I want to be 100% and watch this. He's like, okay. So they got the big screen going there above me, and kind of the curtain up here where they're doing surgery, and I'm watching the screen. And so the doctor talked through the whole thing and told me everything he's doing. And he's like, okay, there's your all in the bone. He's tapping on it. I could feel it up in my shoulder, but not in my arm. And at one point, they kind of worked on a couple of the wounds, and they got to the one down by my wrist, and he starts to cut it open. They're just in there with a scalpel cutting it back open again. Right. And all of a sudden I'm like, and he's like, what? And he's like, I can feel that. And for some reason, there was about a 3-inch area right at my wrist that it wasn't numb. It didn't hit it. And so he's like, so he had to give it a couple shots there. He's like, we'll go to the other one for a while first and come back to that one. So, but he was just like cutting through raw flesh. I'm like, stop.
God.
Anyway, so they got in there, and he's trying to sew those tendons back together. And there's the forearm was just kind of like hamburger. It had been ripped in like 3 pieces, and he was stitching the muscles back together and then kind of wrapping the muscle sheath around it and gets all that together. And then he's trying to attach the tendons to it, and he can't even tell where they're supposed to go because it's so trashed. And so he gets one tied off there, and he's kind of pulling on it and seeing what my fingers are moving, and my middle finger is sticking straight up. It's like too tight. And he's like, oh, that's not good. No. So he had to cut that stitch and then release it a little bit and stitch it back in, and got everything working again and sewed me back up. And it was like 3 or 4 months of physical therapy, 3 or 4 days a week to try to get my hands to move, my wrist to move, my fingers to open, and dexterity. Right. And I'm still not 100% strength-wise, but I don't really even notice anymore. I do everything I need to do, and I'm kind of used to it. So it could have been a lot worse, that's for sure. Yeah,
when we met last year about this time, you were going through the PT, I think, and
I had a brace on for 6 weeks. It kept my wrist and my fingers back so the tendons wouldn't tear out again. Had to keep them relaxed.
Okay.
Had to wear that for 6 weeks, and then just a lot of strengthening. And I still see slight improvements, but overall, I think that's about as good as it's going to get. It's never going to be 100%, but I'm doing what I need to do.
Yeah. So. Well, it looks a lot better than it did a year ago.
Just lots of scars now. Yep.
Yeah. What a story, Todd. Man, And I guess for me, because I know what kind of a backcountry person you are, and how experienced you are, it impresses me more than maybe if it was, you expect this stuff to happen to the naive person who doesn't even know there are grizzly bears around and they're doing everything wrong.
Right.
You've lived there all your life. You've hunted, camped, hiked worked in this country forever, and just bad luck.
It was bad luck. It was a very aggressive bear, more than any bear I've ever seen, that, would come circle around behind you and then charge in like that. And she didn't bluff charge like would be common. She just had her ears back and she was coming. She had me in her sights and she wasn't stopping.
Yeah.
And just, wrong place. Had I been a minute earlier or a minute later, it could have been totally different. You know, and like if I'd been hunting, like during elk season or something, and I came up to that opening, I would have snuck out to the edge and I'd have glassed before I even stepped into that opening. But I was still wanting to be a mile farther up the trail at that point. I was behind a little bit. And so I'm moving along at a 3 or 4 mile an hour fast pace, and so stepping out into that meadow at the same time that the bear was at the upper end. And so we saw each other at the same time. Had I been hunting a little slower, I would have seen her first and backed into the trees, and she would have went on by, and I probably would have never had an issue. So just little things you could have done different like that, but otherwise it's just, a bear circles in behind you and comes in wide open, and you don't have a whole lot of choice what to do. Right. And, the bear spray didn't stop her, but, I know bear spray works. I've used it before. I used it on a little black bear years ago and spun him, and he was gone, and I've read the stories, and you just never know. I automatically pulled the bear spray, and that's what I had to go with. And so, it definitely helped. It slowed. That first attack would have been a lot different had I had not bear sprayed her. Yeah, that's it. I'd kind of made note of that when you were telling the story of how after a little bit you could hear her coughing and wheezing. Yeah, just like within 5 seconds she was done and gone. Yeah, wanted to be no part of it. Yeah. So the first. Your arm got broken the second attack? Yeah, the first attack was just like 5 puncture wounds in my right arm. Yeah. The second attack, first bite was the break in my right arm, and the tendons ripped out and a lot of nerve damage. And that's just bad luck. I mean, what think about the bad luck of you and her retreating the same way when both of you thought the other one retreated the opposite direction. Yeah, because people are like, oh, I can't believe she came, chased you back down again. And I'm like, I don't think that's how it happened. I'm pretty sure that she would not have come back after me when I'm going that far away from her cub. She wouldn't have left him that far. Yeah. I think it was just random. She went over the ridge and we just coming back together in a V shape 10 minutes later, and so a lot of bad luck, but a lot of good luck to survive it twice as well. Yeah, so. That's true. You'll go to the Grizzly Bear Survivors Convention, and the one guy will say, "Yeah, I survived one." You'll say, "I survived 2 of them." Did they end up removing that bear? They went back in. The Fish and Game and interagency Grizzly Bear Study Team, I believe, went back in the next day, and as far as I know, they did not see her at all. Okay, they went back in there to look to see if they'd find her or not. Yeah. Huh. But there was an attack in there like 4 or 5 years before that. I think it was 2011 or something like that, in that exact same area, south cubs. And I talked to that guy. And so, it's a possibility it could be the same bear. Bears live pretty old and they have the territory. Right. So. Huh. Wow. Does it change your perspective about traveling in that country, hunting? It definitely has changed my habits a little bit, and I'm definitely more anxious out there and more nervous. And, I think every day I go out there and I don't get attacked, it makes it a little bit better. But it's slow. It's going to take time. And I think, eventually it probably won't bother me much, but it definitely bothers me. I'm still out there. It's my job. It's my life. It's everything I know. I can't imagine not being in the woods. Right. And so I'm back out there, and I just forced myself back out there. At the end of the hunting season that year, I still had a brace on my arm, and I went back out hunting with a buddy for the last 3 days of the season. Really? And so, because I was like, I got to get a little bit of hunting in. I got to try, And the first day I went out, it was like 3 or 4 days before the end of the season. And I went out by myself, went to a different area, but still, it can be grizzly bear country, but went to a different area, and 30 minutes from the truck. I waited till daylight, hiking up 30 minutes from the truck. I've got a kind of along the trail, you can see a rub tree where a bear will leave the trail and they'll go up to the rub tree and they go back to the trail, and you can see their tracks, and they'll kind of turn their feet like that and put like deep tracks into the duff, into the pine needles.
Yeah.
And I could see this like fresh tracks. And I'm like, oh, great. My first day back, and I'm gonna run into a bear. And I was like, pistol in my hand the whole time, like I'm ready for whatever, just in case, but never did see a bear. Then I went back with a buddy, actually back to the same area, and with a buddy, and we were both armed and had bear spray, and went back, and we stood in the same spot, and I kind of told the story to my friend. And he said he's like the hair standing up on the back of my neck just hearing it, you know.
Oh, gosh.
But I'm back out there now, you know, in the Forest Service this last year. And this last spring, my first day back in the woods up the canyon up here. And I'm going up to a trailhead where I've got a trails project. And right at the trailhead, a sow, grizzly, and a cub ran across in front of me. And I was in the truck about 30, 40 yards in front of me, and she stopped and stood up, and I took a picture out of the truck window, and then she ran off. And it was just a reminder that, you know, people are telling me, oh, you'll never have to worry about it again. That you're one and done. I'm like, yeah, but you put yourself into bear country every day, and the next day could be the next time it happens, and maybe never again, but you don't know when that day's coming. And it was a good reminder, and that whole day out there hiking and on that trail, I was very nervous and very concerned. But you know, it's getting better every day, and I don't think I'll hike in the dark like I used to. I used to be an hour and a half in the dark in bear country just to get way up high, and I don't like that idea anymore. It's like, oh, I'm going to lose some of the best hunting, but I'm just going to take a chance and leave the trailhead right about daylight, and at least I'm going to see something. I don't want to run into it in the dark. If I'm going to have another bear encounter, I want to be able to see what's going on. I don't want it to be a surprise. Yeah. So it's definitely changed how I feel.
So what every listener of our podcast just took from your last paragraph is, Newberg, your turn is coming. Because I'm always saying I'm leaving the truck an hour before shooting.
Be prepared, and hopefully it doesn't. So,
well, one time I was just south of where you were, and it's snowing, and I'm walking in, and in the dark, and I see these prints in the snow, and I'm really not paying that much attention. They're just off to the side of the trail a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then this is opening day of rifle season. And then you know how when there's snow, you can kind of see the shadows made by the edge of the print.
Sure.
Because the radiant light off your headlamp, you can kind of see, oh, there's a trail. There's something walking through the snow over there. And I go down, as the trail goes down into the bottom, that whatever's making that tracks now hits the creek, and it comes to the trail. Mm-hmm. And it is a monster grizzly bear track. Fresh. I mean, like, I just stopped right there. I shimmied back up this little sage hill, and I just sat there until it got light out.
Just make sure he's not right there watching you.
Yeah. Yep. And so I'm like, now what do I do? Well, where the trail went down into the creek and then into some timber. And I thought, well, I know this sage ridge goes around that, and I can look. Mm-hmm. And so I walk over there, and about a half mile out in front out there in an opening, this thing's just tearing up logs and stumps. Wow. I'm like, I went home. I'm like,
don't want anything to do with them.
I know the audience. Just when they heard you say that, because I'm such a,
well, hopefully not. Hopefully you can avoid that.
I hope they can. And now I'm going to have to, maybe when I give my advice, say, leave the truck an hour before the sun comes up, unless you're in grizzly country. I'm passing this on firsthand advice from Todd Orr.
Yes.
So any change in your opinions about, or thoughts or feelings towards grizzly bears after that?
Well, I don't hate grizzly bears, and I don't want to see, I don't want to go out and kill them all or anything like that. But definitely just a reminder of it can happen to you, and just a little bit more cautious, a little more respect. I think the more time you spend in bear country and you don't have an incident, you let your guard down a little bit. You're just they're there, you're thinking about it, you're ready for it. But it's probably not going to happen. Right. And so you hike in the dark, so you don't make as much noise as you maybe should, in the dark as you're hiking. Yeah. And now it's that's just a good reminder to always, be paying attention to that. Right. And a reminder to make sure you have a bear spray, make sure it's not expired, carry a pistol if that's what you do. Have all those. Yeah, you've got your bear spray right there.
Right behind me is a whole shelf of bear spray.
But know how to use it. Yeah. I tell people it's like you can't go out there and get in a surprise situation all of a sudden when you're charged and expect to know what you're doing, because you're going to be stressed. So it's like practice pulling it from the holster, practice pulling the safety out. If you've got an old expired bear spray, or get one of the inert ones and practice shooting it, because it has like a recoil kind of, and shoots up a little bit. You're gonna have to hold a little bit low when you shoot. There's just things, and the more you practice it, it becomes a muscle memory. It's just second nature. And then if you're in a surprise situation, instead of panicking and wondering what you should be doing, you're going to automatically pull that bear spray or pull that pistol, whatever it is that you carry, that you have. Yeah. And you're just ahead of the game by a second. And when you've got a bear coming at you at 35 or 40 miles an hour, you have a couple seconds, and that is that quick. It's amazing how fast they are and how quick they can be on you. So you got to be prepared.
So you, probably more than anybody I know, are proficient and capable with a handgun. Do you think a handgun would have made any difference if say, it would have been not a hunting handgun, but a self-defense type handgun?
Had I guess, it's always hard to say when you look back, but had I pulled the gun instead of bear spray, I'd have had a couple shots.
Okay.
And a bear coming at you like that, low to the ground, fast, and you're in a kind of a panic situation, a surprise situation, I don't know. Maybe you hit it, maybe you don't. You think about the shape of a bear skull, it's kind of shaped like a missile shape, and it's got, the brain is in the back half. And so to stop it dead in its tracks, it's got to be a brain shot or a spine. So to hit, you're going to hit in the front, it's likely going to ricochet out. Even if you hit it right in the eye, there's like a big cavity in there that comes right back out to the side. It could ricochet right back out. Yeah. So about the only way you're going to get a good headshot is from the back half. But if they're coming at you at 40 miles an hour, you're not going to get that shot.
Yeah.
You shoot in the chest or something, maybe you hit a big bone and it wounds it. Maybe you hit a lung or a heart shot, but you can shoot a deer and it'll run 100 yards with a bullet hole through its heart. So you don't know what the bear's going to do. Maybe you could drop it in its tracks. Maybe it doesn't. Now it's wounded.
Now it's
on top of you. It's mad. It's fighting for its life now because it's wounded, and it feels like it's threatened a lot more. And it's not just like territorial or protecting cubs, but now it's fighting for its life.
Right.
And it's going to start just going to rip you to pieces. It's not going to be standing there sniffing you and nipping on you at the end. It's going to keep chewing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I don't know. It's like, and I don't know if people ask, what would you do? Would you do it differently? And it's like, I don't know what I do until you get in that situation again.
Yeah.
It's like every situation is going to be different. I think your bear spray's the excellent choice in that situation because it's likely a bluff charge, and you get a spray out there, that bear stops, he's looking at you, he's smelling that, he's out of there.
Yeah.
You don't know unless you've practiced, with a handgun. It's something like that under a stressful situation. And I know there's, the company tactic here out in town.
Right.
They have a class called Surviving the Grizz where they actually shoot at a target coming at you and both bear spray and with a pistol, and they get you in a stressful situation to practice that.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to do.
Yeah. Well, for me, the two encounters I was talking about when I was archery hunting, they happened so fast that had those bears decided to come to me rather than run, I don't think I could have drawn a handgun in the amount of time they could have covered that distance. I mean, we're talking like 10, 15 yards, 20 yards.
Yeah, it's like a second, at a full charge.
I'm not even sure I'm grabbing for my bear spray immediately, but I don't know that I would have had that deployed fully in time. I think it's always going to be a debate that's out there about, what's the best defense mechanism. I rely on bear spray, and someday people might see me as a pile of bear poop and say, "Oh, that's what you get, Newberg."
But you don't know. You don't. Every situation is going to be different. I carry bear spray when I can. I'm carrying a pistol, and I'm going to be ready for no matter what. Hopefully, I don't have to use either one. Yeah. But I guess if something goes wrong again, if I am down and I bear sprayed or I didn't get a chance to use it, now I got a bear on top of me. Maybe I can get to a pistol. Maybe I'll have some other opportunity. But when I was getting attacked, I thought about that. It's like, should I grab my pistol? It's like, well, I have to pull my hands and arms away from protecting my neck and my face.
Right.
I'm making myself more vulnerable to get flipped over. I'm focusing on something else other than survival. I'm focused on trying to get to this pistol, get it out, turn and look to see where she is, or try to point behind me, or, there's just so many things that can go wrong there. All of a sudden, you're flipped over. It grabs your arm and flips you over, and now she's on your face,
right,
and it's over.
Yeah.
Or you're trying to shoot like this, and who knows? It's just it's a tough situation, and I think every situation is different. And I think person has to practice it, has to think about it, has to have the equipment, the right weapon, the bear spray, and if you're in that situation, hopefully you're making good choices and you can get through it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what the human body can do when you're in a survival situation, the pain that you can put up with, and you can block out that pain, and that'll get you through something like that.
Yeah. Well, you know that better than anybody, obviously. I'm just, as you were telling the story, I'm like, would I have the discipline or the fortitude to have that thing gnawing on me and keep my mouth shut and act like it's not hurting? Or would I be like, you son of a,
right?
Would you?
Yeah, I think your first reaction is to flee or fight or do something.
Right.
But then when you feel that, you got something that's got you smashed into the trail and it has complete control over you, and you know that you have no chance of fighting back at this point with a grizzly bear. Maybe a smaller black bear you might, but something like this, it's like, I have no chance, and my best bet is to just play dead and let her. She's going to leave. I just kept telling myself she's going to go check on her cubs. You can ride this out.
Yeah.
And whether that's the right thing to do, it's every situation is different, and who knows? But all of a sudden, that's the mode I was in, and I was in that survival mode, and it worked.
Right.
But maybe there's a better option out there. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't get any more practice to.
No, I do not want to go through that again.
I think a lot of people who give their, I do this, I do that. Oh, wow. You get a lot of bravado comments about it.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever watched and observed grizzly bears. If you watch those things digging, like this spring when I go spring bear hunting, it seems like I'll see 2 or 3 grizzlies from a far distance.
Sure.
I mean, not like close encounters, but when you watch them digging roots, and you see that if they did bite you in the neck, this isn't like a little black lab biting you.
No.
This is like...
and if they want to, one bite can do it. I mean, they can crush your spine or rip your face half off or whatever they want.
All this stuff about, I'd reach for this, I'd reach for that. Well, you're just leaving your most vulnerable area open. And, and if they bit right there at the base of your skull, around your neck, you'd be paralyzed. I mean, you wouldn't grab for anything because you'd be paralyzed.
Yep.
And so you hear all this stuff, and then about, I do this. Well, I just wonder if people who say that really have seen how quickly that kind of stuff happens. I've not like you have, but you've, I mean, you don't have time to think about anything. It's all about how do I save my life?
It happens so quick. It's just like, what's your first instinctive move you're going to do?
That's going to be,
and then that's it. And then all of a sudden it happens that quick, And, like I said, every situation is a little different, and maybe you're going to get a bluff charge, or maybe you see the animal and it's looking at you, and now you have time to get your pistol out, and you have time to get your bear spray out, and you're ready, and you're cocked and loaded, and now it's like coming closer, and you shoot in the air a couple times, or you might have a totally different situation.
Right.
But in my situation, thinking she's gone a mile over the ridge by now, and all of a sudden it's 30 yards behind you, coming wide open, and I wasn't carrying a pistol for that specific reason. It wasn't easy to get to. It's locked into a shoulder holster with scope covers, point and shoot and hope you hit it kind of thing. So, now I'm always carrying, I've got a 44 shorter barrel revolver with open sights that I'm having right here on my hip, easy to get.
Okay.
I'm considering getting I have a couple 10 mm, so I'm considering getting a double stack 10 mm that I can have as in a chest holster and have 2 options. It's more weight I don't like to carry. I like to go really light, but it'll just make me feel better, I think, and whether I need to use them or not.
Well, no one would know better than you about what's going to make you feel more comfortable. A couple things when it comes to grizzly bears and hunting in grizzly country. We as hunters probably are violating most of the suggested protocols to avoid an encounter in grizzly bear or grizzly bear country,
especially bow season.
We're usually alone, not always, but we're often alone. They say try to travel in pairs, try to make noise. Well, you're not going to walk through the elk woods. Hey, bear!
Not if you're hunting.
Yeah.
No, you're doing the opposite of what you should for bear country, but it's the way to hunt.
You're walking as quiet as you possibly can. You're often calling to sound like something they associate with food.
Exactly.
You have the wind in your face instead of at your back, so they're not going to smell you. Mm-hmm. And if you do kill one, you've got like this aromatic kind of scent and smell.
You've got elk smell all over you now.
Wafting through the woods of like, hey, here we are. If you're hungry.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those bears, they key in on that. You know, like especially like during rifle season, they hear a gunshot and they're like, "Ooh, that's food." You know, they're going to start investigating. So
so we probably put ourselves at a higher likelihood of an encounter because of how we operate. And then there's the actually camping in grizzly country, and I'm probably. I was talking to a person this morning at coffee, and they were asking me about, well, how many, do you follow every one of these protocols? I'm like, yeah. I mean, everything that we eat, every toiletry, everything, every dirty clothes.
It's away from your
camp.
It's
hung in a tree 200-300 yards away. We go over to that opening and we eat over there. We don't bring it back.
Bears have the best smell of any of the animals out there. You know, they can smell something from miles away.
Yeah, so
that's smart.
I try to do all those things, but I will admit when you're laying there at night and you know you're in grizzly country, you know it's late October and these bears are in hyperphagia and they're just looking for calories.
Sure.
And you hear a noise, it's like, what was that?
Is that a squirrel or is that a bear sniffing around? Yep.
It's part of the vulnerability.
Part of being out there in the woods and doing what we enjoy doing. You have to deal with that every day.
Yeah.
Possibility anyway.
But you're going to keep elk hunting in those kind of places?
I'll still be out there chasing the elk, and I was back in the same area last year, and it was the last couple weeks of the season. I had tracking snow, which made me feel better. If I saw fresh grizzly tracks, I probably would have just turned around, or gone somewhere else. So that made me feel more comfortable. There wasn't at least a bear in the immediate area I was at the whole day.
Right.
But I was back in that area. There was one point this last year. One day I had 2 groups of 5 young bulls that I got in on.
Yeah.
And I had snuck in on the first group, and they were all raghorn bulls. And I was like, I'm not big enough. I'm going to look for a bigger bull. And I backed out of there and let them go. And I'm making a circle back around. And I jumped 5 more, or didn't jump, but I saw 5 more bulls all together in one group. And they were feeding along. A couple are bedded down. And I was kind of get a good look at all of them. And there was one 6-point, but fairly small, and a couple 5 points in a raghorn. And so I'm like, I'm not going to shoot any of these today. So I just put my pistol back in the holster, got my camera out, and I'm like, I'm just going to try to sneak in as close as I can and get pictures of these elk. And so I'm like on my knees in a foot of fresh snow, and the wind's coming up the hill just perfect. And I'm sneaking along on my knees, just really slow. And I'd move a little bit, and I'd glass each one of them. And I'm like, okay, he's bedded, but his head's turned the other way. And I'd move another couple feet behind the tree. And I kept going, and I'm just moving through this kind of little opening, and they're all bedded in the edge of the timber. And I got into about 35 yards from a 5-point and the 6-point bull. And I'm taking video and photos with my camera. Cool. And I got to thinking all of a sudden, I'm like, I have been paying attention to nothing but these elk in front of me for the last hour. And I'm half a mile from where I was attacked. And I'm just like, okay, I better start looking behind me, because I could have a bear or a cat or something coming in doing the same thing to me that I'm doing to these elk, trying to sneak in on them, So all of a sudden it just snapped in my head. I'm like, you better pay attention, But that was a fun day, though. I had, got 35 yards from these bulls and got a bunch of video and photo. It was fun.
Well, that's a lot of the fun sometimes, even if you don't fill the tag.
I always said that I'd rather shoot an elk on the last day of the season. So you've got all those experiences, all those stories, and just to think about, and all that. It's like, God, I had a great season. I came so close, or I passed up X number of bulls waiting for a bigger one. And then on the last day, you get some meat in the freezer and fill your tag. That'd be the perfect way to do it.
It is a ton of fun. I guess I know how spoiled I am and how lucky I am that I get to spend 4 months of the year hiking, camping, stomping, chasing either my tags or with the tags of others on these public lands. I always say, and people think I'm joking, and I kind of the way I say it kind of leads to that, but I say, what a country.
Oh, it is.
And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do it. And
just the fresh air out there and the exercise and the things you see. And, you're not going to see any of it if you're not out there. So, and every day is something different. And something maybe it's something as simple as watching a porcupine crawling up a tree and, you just never know what you're going to run into, or a mountain lion you might get a look at, or just watching some mule deer rutting, or there's always something exciting going on out there and something new to see.
Yeah. So if you had a grouse addiction like I do, and maybe you do, Todd, we have never talked grouse.
I don't. No, I don't do much bird hunting.
You don't shoot the grouse when you see them when you're out there?
No, I usually don't. No, if I shoot something, then it's going to scare the elk away.
Oh,
you don't remember that elk could be 100 yards ahead. I'm not big into the bird hunting really.
That's just too bad for that elk. He's not going to get to be a TV star that day.
That's not my number one focus. I'm more into
that's good to know. I need to follow you then, because
I'll let you know when I see grouse.
Yeah, I get wound up about grouse. In fact, my buddies when we archery hunt, it seems like you see the number of grouse you see is inversely or is directly related to the amount of bugling that's going on. You never see them when there's no bugling. As quick as the bugling happens and you're on the chase for the elk, all of a sudden there's some grouse standing there like, shoot me.
And that's your downfall. You're distracted by that. I wouldn't even think twice if you focused on the elk.
I'm not wired right when it comes to that. But, well, I hope the audience appreciates your perspective on all of this stuff, because you've lived it for a long time and you spend more days out in those hills than anybody.
A lot of time in the woods for sure.
Anybody I know.
See a lot of things. And
the fact that you have taken to handgun hunting or pistol hunting for elk like you have,
it's so fun. It's kind of like the old Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry in the woods with a big revolver. But it's something about it. I love the challenge. It's more of a challenge than a rifle for sure. And I don't know, it's just something that's easier to carry around. You can get your hands free when you're crawling over deadfall or on a steep mountainside or something like that. And just more of a challenge. And I like the challenge of getting in close to something like that and making the right shot, rather than trying to shoot a long distance and chancing it. It's like, I want to be in close. I want to see what's going on. I want a good look at it and to outsmart that animal.
Yeah. Well,
that's what's the most important thing, is just the experience of, okay, I could have shot that bull and I didn't, but I outsmarted him and I got a photo instead.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying there, a lot of our listeners can relate to, because a lot of us archery hunt because we want that closer experience. Even when I'm rifle hunting, I think Boone and Crockett has a statement, extend the stock, not the shot. In other words, if you're at that marginal, maybe not distance,
right,
keep stock and try to get closer to that.
That's good.
You've got to do it. I mean,
even closer yet.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, Todd, first of all, thanks so much. I can't thank you enough for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, and your willingness to share what's got to be a pretty personal story at times. And
one of these days, I think I need to put a book together. I've got a lot of stories out there that I could just go on forever. I think I need to start recording them down, and maybe I'll start out with a couple chapters with the bear attack, and then we'll go into just my life in the woods. Well, I think there's a lot out there.
Reading this list that you brought of
that was just something I wrote down
cool
about
stories.
15 minutes before I got here.
Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's about 30 lines on here of really cool stories that Todd just had made note of, and we got to about 2 or 3 of them. You've got the makings of a book outline right there, Todd.
Exactly. Yeah, it all started right back when I was 8 years old as a kid, moving to Montana and chasing, following my dad around as he's chasing elk.
Yeah.
Out in hunting camp, and it all started right there, and it just never ended.
Huh. How cool is that? Well, I hope that when you get that book going, And when it's ready to print, we can jump back on the podcast. I'd rather have you on the podcast because you wrote a book rather than you had another bear encounter.
Okay, yeah, me too. Definitely.
If you have another bear
Let's
encounter,
not even talk about it.
I'm going to
Let's just
say
avoid
this guy is bad luck, and I don't want anything to do with him. But before we leave, let's make sure people know where they can get your knives again. Skyblade?
Skybladeknives.com. Yep.
Knives as in plural.
Knives. Skyblade, just like it sounds. Okay. Skybladeknives.com, or you can just Google my name and find any information you want on me and give me a call or an email or whatever, and we'll chat business and hunting stories.
Well, I hope people will do that. I've seen your knives and they are remarkable. The only downside would be you'd almost not want to take something that beautiful out in the woods and get it all hacked up.
I'm using the best stainless
and
steel that's available out there right now, and I got a lifetime warranty. And probably half the knives I sell are just for gifts that probably don't ever see any use. Yeah. But they're built to last and built to use, and they're good designs. And get out there and use them. Okay. And give me a holler when you need them resharpened. But they hold an edge well, and I stand behind them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and just anybody out there too, get on Instagram and Todd _Orr, little underline there, Orr,
TODD _ORR.
Yep, and I'm posting photos and videos once or twice a day, and I just started, so there's not much up there, but there will be. I've got thousands of photos to put up there eventually, so a little bit of everything.
I can tell you folks, Todd's being modest here. I've seen the photos he's already posted. And I know what kind of life he lives running around these hills. Just watching his, reading or seeing his photos and images every so often are going to be worth the value of following him.
Well, thank you.
So, with that, I guess I want to just thank you again, Todd. And
thank you, Randy.
We'll give you a version of this where you can listen to it in case you let out any secrets about your hunting spots. I told Todd before we got on this that we will edit out if he slips and says, "Oh, so-and-so drainage or XYZ basin," that we'll go back and edit that out because...
Well, I don't think it matters much. Most people cover all that country too. It's just a matter of getting in first and farther back in and paying attention. You just got to be a better hunter, and you can get into the animals.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of hunting pressure.
There is. Yeah, I see people all the time. It's not like it used to be. I was the only one out there, but I run into people. But usually it's funny how I'll be sneaking through the woods, and all of a sudden I see some movement, and I'm like, "Ooh, it's an elk," and I stop, and here comes somebody moving through, and I just stop behind a tree or back out, and they just go right on by. And I'm like, all right, I'm going this other direction. I don't think I ever have run into anybody that I don't see them first. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, folks. And like we said, go check out Todd's stuff. I'm sure you will be very pleased if you do.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, Todd.